Honourable Members, the Deputy Speaker.
Are there any constituency statements by honourable members? Member for Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I table petition EN 10124, reject the $5,000 DVA allied health cap and uphold the Veterans' Covenant. The petition has been considered by the Standing Committee on Petitions and found to be in order. Over 5,000 people signed this petition. These are veterans, family members of veterans, widows, dependents and people in our community who understand the true cost of serving. They've signed this petition because they know what these allied health caps really mean. More bureaucratic process, potentially longer wait times and more frustration with a DVA system that is overloaded and unprepared for these changes. Veterans rely on allied health services like physiotherapy, psychology and occupational therapy to live a decent life despite service-caused injuries. I've heard from a large number of veterans from my electorate about how essential the allied health is for their well-being. I've also heard how frustrated they are with the unwieldy and difficult current system where every claim feels like another battle for them. Based on current fees, $5,000 falls well short of the essential clinical needs of many veterans. For some, $5,000 won't last more than a few months. This cap ignores the 2019 Veterans' Covenant, where Parliament undertook to support all veterans as respected and valued members of the community. It also ignores the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide, which identified financial and administrative barriers to care as major drivers of harm. Veterans in my electorate and across Australia are extremely concerned about the cap, and rightly so. I've heard that for many under these changes, they'll be worse off than before the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. Frankly, from my discussions with veterans, it's clear that there is no trust in the DVA and no trust that the government has their best interests in mind. A pretty fair assessment if you look at the way DVA operates and the findings of the Royal Commission. Announcing a cap without consulting veterans first or publishing specifics of how discretionary expansions work does little to rebuild that trust. These are people who have given so much at great personal cost. They deserve better than these careless, cost-saving measures by the government. That's why I'm so proud to support this petition. It was started by Rebecca, a local veteran and former Air Force medic. Rebecca is a staunch advocate for her community and for a better, fairer world. This petition asks the House to reject the cap or, at minimum, exempt gold card holders and legislate a detailed clinical need override and defer the measure until these protections are in place. Thank you.
I call the Minister for Skills and Training.
Thanks very much, Deputy Speaker. 2 years ago, I visited Findon Primary School with my friend, member for Mill Park, Lead Ambrosio, to hear directly from students about their vision for their school. Now, a dedicated Years 5 and 6 swimming pool was among their more ambitious asks, but one very clear priority they shared with me was the refurbishment of student toilet blocks. So it was really thrilling to return earlier this month to officially open these new amenities, delivered thanks to the Albanese Government's Schools Upgrades Fund. I'm really proud that our government helped make this happen, but I'm even more proud of those student leaders who advocated for this project, knowing that they would be unlikely to be there to benefit from them themselves. It's a really powerful example of the leadership I see in so many young people, speaking up not only for themselves but for those coming after them. So I want to acknowledge Principal Anita Osakova and the former student leaders, Deb and Lucy, for their advocacy, vision and leadership. Now, the Northern Study Hub in Epping has just marked its first anniversary, and 1 year in, the numbers tell a compelling story about the importance of this critical initiative. Across 2 sites, 420 students are now being supported, more than half of them from low SES backgrounds. Over 1 in 3 first in family to attend tertiary studies. These figures matter because they show the Northern Study Hub is doing exactly what it was designed to do, making tertiary education more accessible and our education system fairer for all Australians. For students across the community, this is a model that breaks down barriers of distance, cost, and circumstance too. It means tertiary education can be delivered closer to home, and so that more people in Melbourne's northern suburbs can see university or TAFE as something for them, and critically feel supported through that tertiary education journey. And Deputy Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge the many Ilinden celebrations which are taking place across Melbourne's north this month, and to recognise in this place the proud and significant contribution Macedonian Australians have made to our local communities and indeed to this country. Ilinden is a time of reflection, remembrance and also of celebration, a moment to honour culture, history, identity and the enduring bonds of community. I think it also has to be a chance for us all to recognise the resilience, the pride and the contribution of Macedonian Australians in communities right around the country, but especially in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. In the north, it is part of our shared story, because across generations, Macedonian Australians have built families, businesses, organisations and cultural institutions, all of which form an indelible part of our community. I've been so fortunate to share many friendships with the local community, and I thank them for the warmth, generosity and kindness they continue to show to me and the community more broadly. And Sestic Ilinden. Happy Ilinden to everyone.
Member for Matley.
Good morning. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Nationals is a truly grassroots party, demonstrated by our incredible federal conference held in Canberra yesterday and over the weekend. I just want to commend all the young Nats who turned up. The conference room was hundreds of people wide, and there were so many present who lent their voices to motions that are incredibly important to them. And I want to talk about some of them now. One of the motions from the Victorian Nationals was moved by Ross Johns from Warwick Nabil. It was to ensure that some of our best farming land is not converted into so-called carbon sinks. Cobungro Station in Victoria was mentioned, and there are concerns about the future of Victoria's largest property, Tilapia Downs in Mallee, in my electorate, also becoming a carbon sink. And I just want to say the words of the motion itself, because I think it's important, that this federal conference of the Nationals condemns the Albanese Labor government for A, using taxpayer-funded policies and incentives to take productive Australian farmland out of food and fibre production and lock it up as carbon sinks. B, calls for an immediate end to Commonwealth funding, subsidies and incentives that result in productive agricultural land being removed from food and fibre production for carbon sequestration. And C, affirms that Australia's productive agricultural land must be protected to safeguard our food security, farming communities and future generations. I want to also mention Peter and Leanne Polar from Lalbert, also in my electorate of Mallee, who had two motions calling for local roads to stay open when mining or renewables or transmission projects are occurring, protecting the right to farm, and require progressive rehabilitation bond payments of rehabilitation bonds to cover full site rehabilitation at the end of any project. Their second one was calling for the removal of all taxpayer-funded subsidies, taxation benefits and grants to mineral sands mining and renewable energy projects on all prime agricultural land. In other words, that these projects are self-funded. And I also had the opportunity to call for the conference to endorse my prime agricultural land protection bill, and both moved by the member for Lyne in the House and Senator Canavan in the Senate, that says no funding, no coalition funding will subsidise for projects that trash prime agricultural land.
Thank you. I will remind members that they can be heard in silence. I will call the Assistant Minister for Mental Health, Suicide Prevention, Rural and Regional Health.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak about the best community in the country, the Central Coast of New South Wales, and how the Albanese Labor government is delivering for Dobell. One of the most significant achievements has been the opening of the new Tuggerah Medicare Mental Health Centre, right in the heart of our community. This centre provides free, high-quality mental health support that would otherwise cost people hundreds of dollars, removing one of the biggest barriers to getting help when it's needed. But what really excites me most is not the building itself, although it is beautiful, it's the difference it's already making. We're seeing people come through the doors who would never have sought support. Why? Because we're breaking down the barriers that stop people from getting help. Cost, distance, time and stigma. The centre is welcoming, accessible and designed to meet people where they're at. Let me tell you about Will. Not his real name for privacy reasons. Will is in his mid-20s. Like many young men, he has faced mental health challenges. We know young men are often less likely to seek support and the consequences can be devastating. But because this service was there, because it was free, because it was easy to access and because it felt like a place where he could walk in and ask for help, Will did exactly that. That's what this is all about. People getting support earlier, people getting support closer to home, people getting support before they reach crisis point. That is why this work matters. Because strengthening Medicare isn't just about funding services, it's about making sure those services reach the people who need them most. Every young man like Will who walks through the door is proof that what we're doing is working. That is what strengthening Medicare looks like, and that is what delivering for Dobell looks like. Deputy Speaker, another project making a real difference on the ground is the Food Manufacturing Innovation Hub delivered by the Albanese government. From the name, people might think it's simply a large commercial kitchen. In reality, it's a more than $17 million investment in local jobs, local manufacturing and the future of food production on the Central Coast. This state-of-the-art hub will mean local businesses can trial, test and scale up new products before taking them to markets across Australia and around the world. That means more opportunities for local entrepreneurs, more opportunities for local manufacturers and more opportunities for local workers. The Central Coast is home to some outstanding food and beverage producers, Sanitarium, Master Foods, East Coast Juice. This hub, delivered in partnership with Central Coast Industry Connect, is giving them the tools they need to innovate, expand and compete. Importantly, it's also creating hundreds of local jobs, both during construction and into the future as businesses grow and invest. That is what economic development looks like: backing local talent, backing local industry, backing local jobs. Whether it's helping a young man access support or helping local businesses take its products to new markets, the common thread is simple: we're backing our community.
Member for Fisher.
Deputy Speaker, I want to recognise 6 outstanding residents of Fisher who were honoured in the 2026 King's Birthday Honours list this year in June. These awards recognise Australians who have given years and, in many cases, decades of service to their communities and to our region. I'm incredibly proud that 6 people from across my electorate were among those recognised earlier this year. Dr Hopo Chin, AM of Kings Beach, was appointed a Member of the Order of Australia for significant service to the Indigenous community as an artist and an educator. Dr Rebecca Spindler, AM of Mullaney, was appointed a Member of the Order of Australia for significant service to conservation science, wildlife reproduction research and biodiversity protection. Judith Crichton, OAM of Shelley Beach, received the Medal of the Order of Australia for her service to conservation and wildlife. Jacqueline Gasson, OAM of Ilkley, was recognised for her service to the arts as a ceramicist. Neville Mayle, OAM of Watulla, received the Medal of the Order of Australia for his service to photography. And Christopher Simons, OAM of Montville, was recognised for more than 5 decades of service to communities across Queensland through the Lions Club. Chris is a particularly good example of what community service looks like. After serving our nation in the Royal Australian Navy, he continued serving others for more than 50 years. Through Lions, he's helped communities recover from cyclones, raised funds for Blue Nurses, supported charitable organisations and helped provide meals for disadvantaged children right across Queensland. People like Chris do not volunteer because they expect recognition. They do it because they see something that needs to be done and they get on and they go and do it. That same spirit of service is reflected in each of the 6 Fisher recipients. Whether it's through education, science, conservation, the arts, photography, or community volunteering, each of them has used their skills and their time to make life better for others. That is what makes the King's Birthday Honours so important. They give us an opportunity to recognise people who often quietly and without fanfare have spent years contributing to something bigger than themselves. Our community on the Sunshine Coast is stronger because of people like them. So on behalf of the people of Fisher, I congratulate them on this very well-deserved recognition. Thank you for your service to our community, to Queensland and to Australia, and of course also to the Sunshine Coast.
Member for Boothby.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Congratulations to artistic gymnast Jessie Moore, who won gold in the men's parallel bars at the recent Commonwealth Games and a further 2 bronze medals for team and all-round. Jessie grew up in Boothby and is now living here in Canberra training at the AIS. And Gymnastics SA, which is based in Boothby, is inordinately proud of all he's achieved. Congratulations also to swimmer Matthew Temple, who took home an amazing 4 medals, including gold in the men's 4x100 metre medley relay and the mixed 4x100 metre medley relay. And also to Jasmine Fulgrave, a member of the Marion Swimming Club, who placed 4th in the women's 100 metre backstroke S9 final. Australia has led the medal count for 15 out of 22 Commonwealth Games since the Games first started in 1930, and we continue to lead the all-time Commonwealth Games medal tally. This year, our athletes once again proved unstoppable as we topped the medal table with a total of 171 medals, including 70 gold. Big congratulations to the Boothby athletes and to all the Australians who participated in the Glasgow Commonwealth Games. Deputy Speaker, in July I was again proud to host the Boothby Volunteer Service Awards, celebrating the generosity and hard work of our volunteers here in Boothby. Congratulations to all the volunteers who received awards representing a range of organisations across Boothby. Alex Galanos, Di and Steve Camilleri from Coastal District's Little Athletics, Tracy Grendon and Indra Vithayanathan from Grow SA, Steve Tyerman and Simon Cole from Somerton Yacht Club, Clint Carmack from Marion Life, Leila Rodiero from International Order of the Rainbow for Girls, Beverly Manns from Seacliff Recreation Centre, Dr Richard Lee from Doctors for the Environment, Anne Day from Holdfast Bay Rotary Club, Russ Stovall from Glenelg Bowling Club, Julie Robbins and Samantha and Nick Wilkes from Minda, Clint Garrett from Friends of Waite Conservation Reserve, Jason Hughes from Belair Park runs the Man Walk and Blackwood Ukulele Group, Paul Conroy from Marion Swimming Group, Maggie Turner from Marion Art Group, Rod Ellis from Brown Hill Creek Association and Rosalie Hancock from Kickstart for Kids. 14.1% of Australians volunteer as of the last census, but in Boothby it's 18.1%, and our community is stronger, safer, more diverse and more connected thanks to the amazing work that they do. Recipients of the Volunteer Service Award demonstrated a commitment, a selflessness and a spirit of service that have made a lasting impact in the Boothby community, and they're an inspiration to us all. Thank you.
Member for Grey.
Speaker, I want to talk about Lee Creek in the far north of my electorate and the difficulty residents are facing accessing basic health care. When the former hospital was demolished in 2023, a new health service was built at considerable cost to taxpayers. But residents tell me the model is not meeting the needs of their community. They are travelling more than 250 kilometres for medical dispensing, immunisations, suturing and wound care, services most Australians would take for granted. I was first contacted about this by Hannah Morecambe. Hannah is a fantastic woman. Hannah saw a problem in her community and set out to fix it. Her petition has now passed more than 1,000 signatures. Hannah, who has got 2 young children, is sick and tired of travelling hundreds of kilometres to access basic medical care. Unfortunately, Hannah's story is not unique. Kaylee from Depot Springs Station makes a 308-kilometre round trip to Hawker for her children's routine health checks and immunisations. Evie's 13-year-old son has hydrocephalitis and a shunt. When he developed severe headaches, there was no local GP to assess him. The family drove 155 kilometres before he was transferred to Adelaide. These are not isolated stories. I hear the same thing right across the region. Now, let me be clear, this is no criticism of the health professionals at Lee Creek. They are highly regarded and they are doing an outstanding job. The problem is the model, not the people. I have called on the state government to consider an RFDS service operating model to work with the community and to deliver it. Speaker, I'd like to quote Health Minister Mark Butler's ex-staffer and now member for Colton, Aria Bolkus. Quote, "No one should be left behind when it comes to necessary healthcare, no matter where they live." Well, don't just say it, do it. I call her and the Health Minister to come out to Lee Creek, come out to Coober Pedy, Yorktown and Streaky Bay and see if the healthcare services are the same. I welcome the reinstatement of the Moonta National Trust branch. It marks the end of a difficult period for many volunteers and the wider Moonta community. For those volunteers, this was never about titles or positions. It was about their community and protecting a history that belongs to all South Australians. Moonta's Cornish heritage is more than its buildings. It's the people who give their hours to bring the history to life, not just for their own town, but for the visitors across the country and right around the world. This is a fresh start. Congratulations to everyone who worked to reach this point, and I look forward to the Trust and its local branches working well together into the future.
Member for McEwen.
Recently, I had the pleasure of catching up with Year 12 students in McEwen as they head to their final months of schooling. Everyone knows what a stressful time this can be, and it was very grateful to Moonta Central College and Wallen Secondary College for giving me the chance to swing by for a bit of a chat. For those students, whether they're looking to further study, university or TAFE, an apprenticeship or a full-time job or even a gap year, they don't have to have it all figured out. If someone had told me at 18 I'd be a federal MP, I would have thought they were on smoking something or crazy. I was an apprentice shoemaker, keen on cars and football and other things, but people change careers. They study later in life and discover new opportunities that they never expected. School leavers, like the Year 12s in Moonta and Wallen, are being supported by our government, the Albanese Labor government, in a variety of ways. The Stuff You Should Know publication is full of practical tips, from info on your identity documents, like your birth certificate and passports, Medicare card, tax file number, understanding how the government can assist with accessing further study through Commonwealth-supported places and HECS helplines. We're expanding paid prac to people training an additional 10 frontline health professionals. This will provide cost of living relief for students and support our future healthcare workforce. We've made free TAFE a permanent feature of the national vet system. An investment of $1.6 billion to 2034-35 will support at least 100,000 free TAFE and vet places per year from 2027. And we've cut student debt by 20%. To ease the pressure on the workforce, the workers and students across the country, more than $16 billion in debt for more than 3 million Australians has been wiped. We want the message to be clear. No matter where you live or how much your parents earn, the doors of opportunity are open. They're open to you. I want to thank the Year 12s for their insights. They showed remarkable understanding of the present political environment, particularly the need to reject far-right politics of hate and division. These young people have been lucky enough to grow up in Australia that has embraced multiculturalism and know the benefits of it. I'm optimistic for a future shaped by these young community leaders. Since 2022, our government, the Albanese Labor government, has been working to ensure young Australians have a genuine voice in shaping the policies that affect their lives. For too long, young people have felt they've been ignored by former governments, and we've made it a priority to ensure that their perspective is finally recognised. In doing things such as when we do our environmental grants, we make sure that no one on that committee is over the age of 21, because we want the young people to be involved in setting these things up, because as it goes forward, they're the ones who will be reaping the benefit from it and seeing it grow and develop. And that's important that we give our young people the opportunity and the support they need to be part of the process. So, best of luck with your exams and navigating the years ahead. Guaranteed, in 10 years, 20 years' time, you'll sit back and think, gee, I wish I was at school again, it was so much easier.
Member for Dawson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. 3 years ago, in the dark of the night near Lindeman Island, 4 of Australia's finest military aviators vanished from radar. an Army MRH-90 Taipan helicopter, call sign Bushman 83, crashed during a night exercise, leaving our nation shattered. In a single heartbreaking moment, we lost Captain Daniel Lyon, Lieutenant Maxwell Nugent, Warrant Officer Class 2 Joseph Laycock, and Corporal Alexander Nags. When news of this tragedy broke, a wave of heartbreak swept right across the Whitsundays. Our local emergency responders, rescue crews, volunteers immediately launched into the darkness, searching desperately, trying to bring our boys home. From that night onwards, the Whitsundays did not just mourn 4 soldiers. We adopted their memory, and we wrapped our arms around their families as their very own. Their story became our story. Deputy Speaker, our fine men and women train as they fight, pushing themselves to the absolute limit to ensure they have the skills needed to protect our great country. When they deploy and go to war, they go to win, because in the defence of our nation, second place is never an option. That is the standard of excellence that our fine men and women from the military bring, and it is a standard our national security deserve. Last month, I stood with their loved ones, our local first responders and the 6th Aviation Regiment at Shute Harbour in the Whitsundays. There, a lasting memorial overlooking the Whitsunday Passage was unveiled, a place where our region's beauty meets the heavy weight of our national grief. The unbreakable bond between the Whitsundays and these 4 brave men was forged during the critical days of their search. Local Queensland Police, volunteer marine rescue crews, RACQ CQ Rescue, and selfless SES volunteers worked tirelessly alongside the Defence Force, braving treacherous tides, deep waters, and the pitch darkness of Lindeman Island. Our community saw firsthand the unwavering grit and resolve of our local first responders, and they searched around the clock to bring our fallen heroes home. This defines the true spirit of Dawson and connects our region to Bushman 83 forever. Deputy Speaker, this memorial guarantees that the courage, devotion and sacrifice of Bushman 88 will never fade. To the families of the fallen, our community stands with you today, tomorrow and forever. Your men will forever be held in the sacred place in the heart of the Whitsundays. Their duty is done, their memory is secure, lest we forget.
Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories and Emergency Management.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise today to recognise an outstanding achievement by another one of Eden Monero's sporting champions, Pambula's own James Jimmy Reynolds, following his recent gold medal success in the men's para bowls at the Commonwealth Games. Jimmy and his teammate Damon Delgado nabbed gold in the finals against New Zealand after thumping Scotland in the semis. The Glasgow gold is Jimmy's 2nd medal at the Commonwealth Games. At the 2002 Games, he won a bronze for Australia. His dedication to sport began early, claiming the New South Wales under-18s junior singles titles at just 15 years of age. He's represented Australia at 3 Commonwealth Games and won gold at the 2023 World Bowls Championships. A 24-year playing career at the elite level is an outstanding achievement for any athlete, and it must qualify Jimmy as one of the most enduring sporting professionals in the nation. With this win, Jimmy joins just 3 other Australian athletes to have won at both the Commonwealth Games and World Bowls Championships. His achievement has been celebrated right across Eden Monero, but nowhere more proudly than at his old primary school, Pambula Public School. Students and staff cheered Jimmy on with a special viewing of the game at the morning assembly. Jimmy Reynolds embodies the values of perseverance, determination and excellence. He's made his community and his country incredibly proud. I congratulate Jimmy on his achievement, thank him for his contribution to Australian sport and for the inspiration he provides to generations across Eden Monero. And a special shout out as a former schoolmate of Jimmy's. We love you, mate. I would also like to acknowledge the efforts of the Windelamar Progress Association, whose annual Great Cake Auction has once again delivered an outstanding result for the community. This year's event raised more than $11,000 for Can Assist Goulburn, helping support local people and families facing a cancer diagnosis. It was a wonderful example of a community making a real difference in the lives of others. I was fortunate enough to secure the winning bid on a delicious white chocolate cheesecake, which was very well received by my team. The Windelamar Progress Association plays a vital role in the local community. The association maintains the community hall, a place where residents come together for events, activities, and the much-loved markets that help keep the town connected and thriving. In rural and regional communities, organisations like the Windelamar Progress Association are the backbone of the community. Through their hard work, dedication and countless volunteer hours, they create opportunities for people to connect, support one another and strengthen community spirit. I thank the members of the Windelamar Progress Association for their extraordinary contribution to the Windelamar community and congratulate them again on another highly successful Great Cake Auction.
In accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for members' constituency statements has concluded. I call the clerk.
Private members' business. Notice number 1, a motion on infrastructure and regional communities to be moved by the member for Indi.
Member for Indi.
I move the motion relating to infrastructure in regional communities in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Regional and rural Australia is playing a vital role in hosting the infrastructure that powers the energy transition. Yet many rural communities feel overlooked. Too often they feel the transitioning is happening to them without seeing clear benefits flowing through as things like lower energy bills or investment in key local priorities. Regional Australia is not anti-renewable. Many people in the regions are embracing the opportunity. Farmers increasingly hosting energy generation and storage projects to diversify their income and help them continue to farm. Local governments are working with proponents to create future funds and deliver infrastructure that would otherwise be out of reach. Households are taking up batteries at record pace through the Cheaper Home Battery Scheme, a policy that we drove from the electorate of Indi. More than 2 in 3 regional Australians believe local communities can benefit from hosting renewable energy generation projects if it's done right. That's where the disquiet is. Right now, there's a patchwork of rules and requirements between and within states and territories, making it hard for communities to know the benefits that they can expect from renewable projects. In Victoria, there are community engagement and social value guidelines, renewable energy zone community benefit plans and payments in lieu of rates. These are all different schemes and guidelines that determine what proponents pay to local communities and councils. But in practice, 2 neighbours either side of a res border or state or territory border can face major differences in what proponents are expected to bring to the table. When the system is this complicated, it's the communities, the regional communities, that lose out. I hear time and time again that communities are frustrated. They can't see the long-term investment in their towns and they're unsure how to secure lasting benefits from the energy transition. Right now, in my electorate of Indi, there's a proposal in Euroa that would power as many as 40,000 houses in Melbourne without addressing local reliability and brownouts. The council and the community are in discussions right now with the proponents to see if they can fix this. That's what I'm talking about. My motion proposes a solution. It calls on the government to establish a permanent, nationally consistent community benefit framework with minimum mandatory contributions paid by renewable energy proponents to communities hosting their infrastructure. The details, including payment value, recipients and governance, should be developed with those regional communities. The Energy Infrastructure Commissioner, the proponents themselves, of course, RDAs and all levels of government. But 2 principles must be included if this framework is to work. First, funding must flow into the communities hosting renewable energy infrastructure. It should be flexible enough to support local priorities and deliver long-term intergenerational projects that actually improve the quality of life for the people who live in that area. We can still see the legacy of the gold rush and the wool boom in regional infrastructure today. And this new era of regional resources should also leave a lasting legacy for good for future generations. It should look like cheaper power or investment in childcare services, reliable telecommunications or key worker housing. And some of these things are already happening in places like Dubbo and Armidale. Second, the framework should support local governments to manage their growing role in delivering the energy transition on the ground, because councils are under increasing pressure to manage community concerns and engage with proponents, yet they lack the funding, the staff and the specialist expertise required. So a portion of community benefit funding should help councils access that expertise. And this will support ultimately better outcomes for those strapped councils, for the communities, for the proponents and ultimately for the nation in the energy transition. By and large, renewable proponents also support minimum community benefit expectations, and only this month the Clean Energy Council called for a consistent, permanent, minimum renewable resources payment similar to a royalty to help rebuild trust. And when communities and proponents alike are calling for this solution, it's really time that the government listen. Look, I welcome the growing recognition that communities should benefit when they host major infrastructure, and this conversation has become more prominent recently in relation to the proposed AI data centres. And as that debate continues, we must recognise that regional communities have long called for a fair share of benefits for the important role they play in hosting renewable energy infrastructure. We can't ignore reality. The energy transition is happening. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make sure we get it right, and we owe it to the regions to get it right.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Member for Wentworth.
I second this motion and reserve my right to speak.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Solomon.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I want to talk about regional development and the enormous economic potential across the Northern Territory, and it goes to a few of the things that the previous speaker touched on. But the reality is, Deputy Speaker, that potential doesn't create jobs. Investment does. The Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility helps get projects off the ground in Northern Australia, where distance, remoteness and higher infrastructure costs can make that attracting that private investment all that much more difficult. Under the Albanese Labor government, NAIF is here to stay, extended for another decade. And we can see what that backing delivers. The Arafura Rare Earths Nolans project, 135 kilometres north of Alice Springs, is a good example. Nolans project will mine and process rare earths right here in Australia. NAIF has been instrumental in making Nolans a reality, helping to unlock around 600 construction jobs and then 350 ongoing jobs. That means jobs for Territorians, opportunities for local businesses and regional development. But that Commonwealth investment needs to be matched by delivery from the CLP NT government. Its own budget papers show net capital investment was underspent by $376 million in 2025-26 financial year. Now, I've been advocating for a Territory Economic Development Zone to bring together investment in infrastructure, housing and workforce measures, importantly, to get projects moving and to unlock more private investment. And I do welcome the NT Chief Minister finally getting on board with that approach. But now we need to turn that rhetoric into collaborative action. The Territory cannot afford to stand still. I recently convened meetings in Darwin with the senior members of the Australian Defence Force, members of Defence NT from the NT government, and National Intermodal, a government business enterprise, who we have funded to assist with the rollout of our $440 million federal government contribution towards establishing logistic hubs across the NT. These key federal government investments in logistics infrastructure will help drive resource and renewable energy development in the Territory. And in this place, many times before, I've spoken about Territory Gold, which is the best solar radiation in the world. The Territory is at the forefront of Australia's energy transition, and projects like Sun Cable and Energy North are tapping into that incredible potential of solar energy to power local industry and to meet the energy needs of our regions and our neighbours. Big IT players like Amazon, Google and Microsoft are very interested in Territory Gold to power their data centre activities for AI and the cloud. They always have been interested, and I encourage the NT Chief Minister to give up on continually saying no to Commonwealth support and to say yes to renewables and their rightful role. It is important that this AI demand in the Northern Territory taps into the geographical and institutional stability of the Northern Territory's place in Australia, our membership of our nation in Five Eyes security arrangements, along with access to the required telecommunications and other important infrastructure. But these investments must benefit the community and must deliver for the regions and deliver for the national interests. To achieve success, these operators must deliver ongoing acceptance and approval from local communities, stakeholders and the public. That is to say that they need social licence. The federal government has set out expectations of data centres and AI infrastructure developers to set out what Australia requires from these data centre companies, so the community can have confidence in their role and ensure that AI is sustainable and underpinned by strong social licence. These expectations put the needs of the Australian people first, ensuring our communities benefit directly through jobs, investment in skills and innovation, while strongly supporting Australia's clean energy transition and safeguarding our long-term water security. Thanks, Deputy Speaker.
I call the member for Wentworth.
Deputy Speaker, I rise in support for this motion, and I thank the member for Indi for putting this forward. We are at a critical juncture. We need to build power in this country, across the country, including in regional areas. This is critical for all of us, for the cheap energy of all Australians. It is critical for new and emerging energy needs, such as in AI infrastructure, which is critical to our sovereignty as well. It's critical to our future opportunities. We need to build it fast, and we need to build it predictably. And secondly, the communities who host this energy infrastructure should receive a benefit from hosting this. This is obvious to most Australians, but we do not yet have the proper legislative environment to make sure that actually happens. And that is why this motion is so important. Regional mayors have told me of communities plunged into blackouts, unable to access the very energy infrastructure their towns host. When Broken Hill lost power after a storm destroyed transmission towers in 2024, the residents reasonably expected that the big battery, powered by the solar and wind farm nearby, would be able to keep the lights on. But it didn't. It took 10 days before an agreement was reached to allow the community to tap the source of energy they had been hosting in their own backyard. Many communities in regional Australia are not opposed at all to the development of renewable energy and of batteries. Many support it. They see it as an opportunity, but what they do object to is being run roughshod over. Community benefit is a humble request for a partnership, one developers tell me that they are happy to meet. Community benefit isn't new. New industries have always struck grand bargains. In the past, those bargains have looked like investment in anchor infrastructure, roads, ports, dams, pipelines, assets with positive spillovers that outlasted the boom that built them. It looked like a town pool and jobs for the locals. Today's infrastructure is more dispersed and passive. Solar, batteries, data centres, so the bargain will look different. Communities should have genuine agency over what that benefit looks like, shaped by their own needs. But we also need national minimum standards. Clear expectations mean fewer fights and fewer delays, a faster transition and a fairer one, leaving host communities stronger. And this is where the national government needs to step in. Because we must go faster. Renewables reached 43% of our electricity last year. 82% by 2030 means almost doubling in 4 years. Yet just 2.3 gigawatts of new generation reach financial close in 2025. We are not building anywhere near the speed that is required. And data centres bring new opportunities and new community concerns. Australia has a competitive advantage in our ability to house compute with our abundance of land and our relative ease with which our continent can harness renewable energy. From a sovereignty point of view, from an economic point of view, I believe that we should take advantage of this opportunity to host these data computer centres. But we can only do that in a way that builds social licence and where we can build that quickly and efficiently. And that's where community benefit comes in. Social licence is not a nicety. Its absence is not just bad for communities, it makes decisions less predictable and investment more uncertain. Merit appeals routine add more than a year to a project, with real costs in contract negotiations and financing and option costs. And those costs fall on all of us. The Productivity Commission found faster approvals reduce emissions, reduce costs for developers, attract investment and make energy cheaper, all supporting productivity growth. Accelerating wind farms and accompanying transmission by a single year could reduce electricity prices by 7% over the decade. 7%. That is the price of the fights we do not need to have. So this is why this motion is so important. We need to manage this energy transition. We need to build abundant energy in this country. And we need to do that with the support of the communities that are hosting this. Now, I come from the city. You know, in political terms would say, well, why do you care about this? I care about this because the regional community are hosting energy infrastructure that benefits me and my community. And I think it is fair that those communities are hosting that get community benefit too. There are those in the Parliament and across the country who seek to divide the city and the country. It is wrong and unnecessary, because if it's not fair to the communities in regional Australia, then it's not going to be fair for this country either. So this is why all parliamentarians should be getting behind community benefit for this infrastructure in a way that gives better predictability, better speed of development, and can actually accelerate this energy transition in a way that benefits communities.
I call the member for Hunter.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank my friend, the member for Indi, for moving this motion about community benefits and the role regional Australia is playing in our energy future. There is one thing I want to make very, very clear from the start. Regional communities deserve straight answers, proper consultation and a fair share when they are asked to host major new infrastructure. It's just fair. In the Hunter, we know what it means to power this beautiful country. For generations, our coal mines, power station workers, tradies and local businesses have helped keep the lights on here, but also around the world. And as our energy system changes, the Hunter will keep playing a big role here. But if we're going to ask communities from YE and Cameron Park and Cessnock through to Singleton to host new transmission, solar, batteries and other energy infrastructure, then those communities need to be part of the conversation from day one. They can't be treated like an afterthought. We've seen what happens when engagement isn't good enough. At Mitchell's Flat near Singleton, local people raised real concerns about a proposed solar farm on prime agricultural land. Farmers spoke up, community groups spoke up, I spoke up. In the end, the developer decided not to proceed at that location. I said at the time that it was a great project, it just was the wrong location for that one. And that's the point, Speaker. Supporting renewable energy doesn't mean every project belongs everywhere. We've got mining land and industrial land right across the Hunter. We should be looking hard at places like that before putting pressure on good farming country. Good engagement means listening before decisions are locked in. It means talking to the people who live there, not just sending them a brochure when everything's been decided. And community benefits has to really mean something. It should mean local jobs. It should mean local apprenticeships. It should mean work for local contractors. It should mean opportunity for local manufacturers, truckies, cafes and small businesses. It should mean support for local roads, sporting clubs, community facilities and services. Because when a region hosts infrastructure that will operate for decades, the benefits should last for decades as well. We're already seeing that approach around the Hunter Transmission Project, where work is underway on a benefit sharing package and opportunities for local businesses and workers. Regional communities have been asking these questions for a long time. Long before the recent debate about AI data centres, people in places like the Hunter were already asking a simple question. If we're hosting the infrastructure, what does our community get back? The Albanese government has been working on that question. Through the Capacity Investment Scheme, the government is delivering more than $1.7 billion in shared community benefits, $1.9 billion in First Nations benefits, and an estimated $35.8 billion in additional spending on local content and businesses. We've also strengthened the social licence requirements for projects supported through the Capacity Investment Scheme. And importantly, the Developer Rating Scheme opened to industry in March this year. That scheme is about something I hear regularly from people in the Hunter. Who are the good operators? If a developer engages early, deals honestly with landholders and treats the community with respect, that should count for something. And if they don't, that also should count for something. The rating scheme gives communities more information and gives developers a reason to lift their game. We've also strengthened the role of the Australian Energy Infrastructure Commissioner and released national guidelines for community engagement and benefits for electricity transmission projects. But I do agree that we have to keep moving. There are different rules across different states, there are different approaches between different projects, and that can be confusing for communities. Whatever framework we use, the test should be simple. Does the local community get a genuine say? Are landholders treated fairly? Are local workers and businesses getting opportunities? Are there real and lasting benefits for the towns doing the heavy lifting? And are developers held to a high standard? That's what matters to me, Speaker. The Hunter knows better than most that changes must be practical. The Hunter has powered Australia for generations, and we're proud of that history, and we're proud of the workers who built it. But the next chapter has to be done with regional communities, not to them. If we get consultation right, put projects in the right places and make sure communities share the benefit, then we'll build stronger projects, stronger communities and stronger systems as well. Thank you, Speaker.
Member for Dawson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I thank the member for Indi for bringing this motion forward. I support strong communities, and I support communities receiving their fair share when they host infrastructure. But this motion does address the symptom and not the disease. The real problem is that Australia has built an energy transition around increasingly complex regulation before properly asking the most basic questions. Does the project work? Is the power reliable? What will it cost? And what happens to the land when the project is finished? Look at the Mount Challenger wind farm proposal in Dawson. Families around Proserpine and Kelsey Creek spent months living in needlessly uncertainty over massive turbines placed right next to their homes and also being developed on prime agricultural farmland. After 6 months of testing, Alinda finally confirmed what should have been obvious from day one: the site is not suitable. It should not take half a year of community anxiety to reach a conclusion that common sense should have dictated from the start. The community deserved better sequencing. Test the site, establish the economics, establish the feasibility, and then ask communities to engage meaningfully with a serious proposal. Deputy Speaker, this is where the Coalition offers a different vision. We believe in energy abundance, not energy scarcity. We support coal, gas, hydro, and renewables where they make sense and are in the right place. We will also lift the prohibition on nuclear energy. Our policy is explicitly technology neutral and focused on affordable, reliable power, the source that will generate the most cost-effective and reliable electron. Because net zero cannot be the destination at the expense of security and prosperity. Energy-intensive industries need electricity when they need it, not only when the sun shines or the wind blows. Look at Tomago Aluminium. The government, New South Wales government, have bailed them out with a $2.5 billion support package to secure the smelter's future. This proves the grid cannot deliver reliable and affordable industrial power at scale. So billions are being spent propping up an energy transition that squeezes out manufacturers. And there are clear lessons from overseas. Let's look at Germany. It pursued an enormous energy transition built largely on renewables and imposed extraordinary costs on the energy system. The result is a country where consumers face some of the highest electricity costs in Europe, while energy-intensive industry face electricity prices more than twice those paid in the United States. It is an economic story of ideology over people and prosperity. When energy becomes more expensive, everything becomes more expensive. Manufacturing becomes less competitive. Investment leaves. Jobs are put under pressure. And eventually the middle class starts asking a very simple question. How do we work this hard and somehow become poorer? Australia is already heading in that direction. 2 parents are working, 2 incomes in the household, and yet the mortgage, groceries, insurance, electricity and fuel consume more and more of what they earn, because energy is the economy. We have the opportunity to learn from Europe's mistakes before we repeat them. We should not spend trillions of dollars building an energy system that makes Australian industry less competitive and Australian families poorer. And the question must be asked, who pays later? Who pays to dismantle the turbines? Who restores the land? Who carries a liability when a company disappears, is sold or walks away? Regional Australia must not be the graveyard of infrastructure, and prime agricultural land should not be permanently compromised. The Coalition is already committed to protecting our farmers and require a social licence for energy infrastructure. That matters because food security is national security. Australia must be able to feed itself. We need reliable power, affordable power, securable power, power that supports manufacturing, agriculture, jobs and prosperity. Security before symbolism, prosperity before ideology. Net zero should never be the destination at which we sacrifice the things that actually make Australia prosperous.
The time allotted for this debate has expired. I call the clerk.
Private members' business. Notice number 2, a notice relating to Commonwealth prac payment to be brought by the member for Holt.
Member for Holt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to the Commonwealth prac payment in terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Deputy Speaker, at the heart of this motion is a simple principle. No Australian should have to choose between completing the training our country needs or keeping a roof above their heads. Mandatory placement turns years of study into vital skills used in our classrooms, hospitals and communities. They are essential but can place enormous financial pressures on students. When placement begins, life does not pause. Rent is still due, groceries still need to be bought, there is still petrol, parking and childcare to pay for. At the same time, students often have to reduce their hours at work or give up paid employment altogether. Before coming to this place, I spent almost 15 years as a pastry chef at Woolworths, working shifts to pay the bills and keep my household running. I know what it means to rely on a regular wage and the stress that comes when your ability to earn is disrupted. For too many students, this becomes placement poverty. I have heard of students sleeping in their cars because they could not afford accommodation while completing their training. Others have come close to abandoning their qualifications, not because they lacked ability, passion or commitment, but because they could no longer carry the cost. In 2024, the Albanese Labor government acted. We established the Commonwealth prac payment for nursing, midwifery, teaching and social work students. They receive $338.60 a week during mandatory placement, benchmarked to the single Oz study rate and indexed annually. This support comes when students need it the most. It allows students to focus on learning, developing their professional judgment and gaining hands-on experience rather than calculating which bill can wait. This motion recognises that next step. The government is investing a further $158.4 million to expand paid prac. From July 2027, the payment will be available to eligible students in 10 more frontline health professionals: clinical psychology, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech pathology, paramedicine, radiography, pharmacy, rehabilitation therapy, audiology, and podiatry. Each of these professions play an irreplaceable role in the lives of Australians. Australia needs these skills, but qualifying requires major commitment. Radiography, for example, practical training can account for more than a year of the degree. A student may need to reallocate for weeks or months, cover travel and accommodation, and sometimes maintain rent in 2 places, all while earning less. This challenge is greater outside our major cities. Regional placements often involve longer travel, higher reallocation costs, while regional and remote communities experience serious health work shortage. Removing these financial barriers make it more realistic for students to train in those communities and consider building their careers there. With this expansion, around 95,000 students are expected to receive assistance each year. For families in Holt, this matters deeply. Holt is one of the youngest and fastest growing communities in Australia. Many young people want to build careers in health and care, while their families work hard to manage the cost of rent, food, and transport. Opportunities should depend on students' ability and determination, not on whether their family can afford months of compulsory unpaid training. Deputy Speaker, there is a clear difference in approach of those opposite. At the last election, the Coalition opposed replacing Commonwealth prac payment with the concessional loan added to students' help debt. Under their plan, financial support during mandatory underpaid placements would have come at a cost of an even more student debt. Through paid prac, the Albanese Labor government is helping more students complete their qualification, move into essential careers, and strengthen the skilled workforce on which Medicare depends on. It is practical reform that changes lives.
And I thank the member for Holt. Is the motion seconded?
I second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
And I thank the member for Deakin. The question before the Federation Chamber is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Kooyong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I commend the government for this expansion of the Commonwealth prac placement for 10 additional allied health disciplines, and thank the member for Holt for bringing this motion to the House. This announcement has been welcomed by students, universities and the health sector. Since I arrived in this place, I have called often and loud for adequate support of prac placements in all care disciplines. Practical placements are an essential component of many degrees. They're mandated for students seeking to become nurses, midwives, teachers, social workers, OTs, physiotherapists, psychologists, vets, dentists, doctors and other occupations which are indispensable for the well-being of our communities. It's a complete false economy to require those students to shoulder the cost of these placements alone. Many students are expected to complete hundreds, even thousands of hours of mandatory placements while buying groceries, paying for their rent, their transport, their insurances, their equipment and other expenses of daily life in what is a prolonged cost of living crisis. During prac placements, students are often unable to maintain their usual paid jobs. This causes financial stress, deferments, tragically, sometimes non-completion of their university courses. I've heard from students from Kooyong and around the country of how difficult things are for them. One occupational therapy student told me they were required to take more than 640 hours of unpaid placement in their final year. To make ends meet, they had to resign from one job, significantly scale back hours at 2 other jobs and get help from their parents to cover their accommodation costs. Another described classmates who would finish a day of study, have a brief sleep in their cars, work overnight hospitality shifts, then return to class the next morning. A nursing student told me she'd been forced to defer their final year of study because of an increase in mandatory placement hours, which made it impossible to take care of her child. Another student, a single parent studying nursing and midwifery, said that they ultimately withdrew from placements because they just could not cope with the cost of
childcare and of travel. These are not isolated stories. They're examples of a system which has relied on students paying their own way to complete necessary training at the cost of their own financial security, when our communities desperately need the skills that those students are working for. I welcomed the introduction of the Commonwealth prac placement in the 2024-25 federal budget. I congratulate the Minister for Education on this expansion of the scheme. Providing financial support to students who are undertaking placements is a sensible measure. It'll help more Australians complete their qualifications. It'll help them enter sectors in which workforce shortages are acute. But while this expansion is positive, it's not the end of the conversation. Extending prac placement to students in clinical psychology, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech pathology, paramedicine, radiography, pharmacy, rehabilitation therapies, audiology and podiatry, on top of the existing coverage for nursing, midwifery, teaching and social work students, yes, it's great cause for celebration. But the ongoing exclusion of other healthcare students is unfair and it is unsustainable. Placement poverty is real. The Albanese government needs to explain to us and to the students who are experiencing that poverty why it has chosen to fix it for some but not for others. Not for medical students, dentistry students, veterinary students, nutrition and dietetics, optometry and osteopathy students. There is no fair, no equitable rationale for these omissions. They should be immediately addressed. Our health system, education system and our communities will be stronger when every student has the necessary support to complete their training and contribute to their skills to Australia's health workforce. If the objective of this expansion is to remove participation barriers and to strengthen Australia's future workforce, then the government must continue examining how this scheme can be fairly broadened and improved over time. The Albanese government has to continue closing the gap in education. It must extend paid prac to all care sector students so that no one has to interrupt their training to pay for their rent, to pay for their food and to look after their kids.
And I thank the member for Kooyong. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Deakin.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased to support this important motion by my good friend, the member for Holt. Paid prac is good for students and it's good for the nation. The choice between making a living and pursuing your studies is not a real choice at all. If they can't pay the rent, there's no way they can finish their qualification. This isn't just a bad outcome for those individuals, it's a bad outcome for Australia, as we prevent smart, hard-working young people from entering the essential jobs we all rely on. When I was a teacher in regional Victoria, I met a lot of students who were choosing what they wanted to do next, and the requirement to do an unpaid placement was a decisive factor from them. We're losing the very kinds of young people we're trying to push into professions. Regional kids are more likely to remain regional professionals, so it is essential that we ensure that opportunity is not decided by postcode or by income. A compulsory placement should be assessing whether you are ready to enter a profession, not whether your bank account can withstand a hit of weeks or months. And that's what it's become for too many young people qualifying for the jobs we really need them entering into. If they need to do unpaid work, it turns completing a degree into a financial obstacle course. And what paid prac does is it addresses that last really important hurdle that ensures that they can finish their qualification if they're willing to do the hard work in order to complete it. It is something that is critical to equity in our system. We're investing so much effort into ensuring that the opportunity of entering into a university qualification is available to all young people willing to do the work and who have proven their capability to be successful. But it's become a financial minefield for far too many students. And we've seen it in practical terms. People dropping out of courses simply because they can't afford to complete the final prac. I think back to when I was training as a teacher. I was living in a caravan in a regional town while, eating mostly Easy Mac, and I was one of the lucky ones because I could afford, to pay not only my rent but also, rent on a caravan park site. Not everyone can afford to do that. A lot of students got their head just above water at the best of times. Week by week, so they cannot afford to go weeks or months without a normal income. And that's what we expect them to do. Students are either required to give up a lot of their time working or simply can't work at all because they're placed far away from where they normally reside. And it's quite normal. A lot of young people cannot choose where they conduct their placement. Options and opportunities are limited, so sometimes they need to do these practicums far away from where they live. So they need somewhere to stay, or they need to put more petrol in the car so they can get to or from there every day. And we need to think of those practical issues when we're designing a system, because we can't separate our system from reality. And so we know that this has been a problem for a very long time, and it is a barrier to entry to far too many Australians who would make terrific professionals. They have the right attitude, they have the capacity, and this is just a small barrier that is really getting in the way for us achieving our goals. So we know that paid placement poverty is real. We know it's a barrier, and so paid prac is there to alleviate that barrier for professionals that we really need to be expanding in number at this point in time. You look at the list of allied health workers or future allied health workers that this is supporting, and they're the very people we need with an ageing population and increasing support needs in our community. The shortage of these professionals would be unacceptable for most of our communities. I know in my own community of Deakin, we've got a lot of great young people, not all of whom could afford to make that sacrifice, but we also have an increasing number of older Australians who will be needing physiotherapists, who will be needing those other allied health professionals as time goes on. So we need to make sure that we've got that pipeline of workers ready to meet that expanding demand. Professionals that we already know are in short supply in many parts of Australia. So it is essential that we confront and deal with this issue. We've seen the success of paid prac in the professions that have already been enjoying it, including teachers and nurses. So we know it works. We know it makes a significant and material difference to the success of people completing these qualifications, and that it ends a barrier confronted by far too many younger people and other Australians of all ages who are completing a qualification. So it is just a small incentive, and relative to the cost of investing in their degree, the last thing we want to do is invest a whole lot of money encouraging them to get into university and then invest a whole lot of money in getting them through units only for this final hurdle of a practicum to prevent them from completing the qualification. It undermines the investment, the financial investment we as the Commonwealth are making in these young people. So this is a final piece of the puzzle. It's an essential piece of the puzzle, and I'm incredibly proud of the Albanese Labor government for stepping in with this really important initiative. And I thank all those in the Parliament who have given voice to the young people about this issue, because those have been important contributions as well, as have the contributions of many fellow members of the Albanese Labor government who've been pushing this for some time, and I include the wonderful member for Holt among them, because they realise that you can't separate...
This time has expired, and I thank the member for Deakin. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Indi.
I thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted to speak today on the expansion of Commonwealth prac payments to allied health students studying psychology, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech pathology, paramedicine, radiography, pharmacy, rehabilitation therapies, audiology and podiatry. 8 weeks ago, Senator Pocock and I brought a petition to this Parliament signed by more than 43,000 people, calling for the Commonwealth prac payments to be expanded to all allied health and medical students. As well as signing on to that call, thousands took the time to share their story with me about why they supported expanding Commonwealth prac payments. And I've read hundreds of these stories, and the member for Deakin has outlined some of the key themes that come from those stories. Stories about physical, financial and mental toll mandatory unpaid placements are having on our future healthcare professionals. A constituent of Indi wrote that her unpaid placement put her in such a financially vulnerable position that 1 year on, her finances simply still have not recovered. Another constituent told me that they dropped out of uni altogether for this reason. What a loss. It's not just prospective students that support this. Senior clinicians, university lecturers, parents and everyday people put their name on this petition, calling for more support for our healthcare students. One woman wrote, "We need the workforce to save our lives." She was a cancer survivor treated by radiation therapy. We simply can't underestimate the impact of health professionals right across Australia. Every Australian relies on doctors, pharmacists, dentists, physios, psychologists and many, many other health professionals. But mandatory unpaid placements have been causing health students to delay and drop out altogether, and it absolutely isn't good enough, and it's bad public policy. And that's why I'm just so pleased that the government has listened and acted on the calls of tens of thousands of Australians to expand Commonwealth prac payments to more allied health students. And I thank the member for Holt for bringing this motion to the House. It's an example of when government, independents, backbenchers, frontbenchers work together with community to listen and improve things. I thank the Prime Minister and Minister Clare in particular for taking the next step in boosting the future of our health workforce. It's going to make a real difference to allied health students and it will pay dividends. But I have to call the member for Deakin. It is not the final piece. The job is not done yet because unfortunately some allied health professionals have been left out in the cold along with medical and veterinary and dentistry students. I want to make the case for vets. I'm a rural Australian and I've spoken in this place before about allied health and medical professions in detail. Regional Australia is in dire need of more vets who do so much more in addition to looking after beloved household pets. A country vet is just as likely to be treating our horses, our cows, our sheep as our cats and dogs. Veterinarians are absolutely essential for protecting our biosecurity and agricultural productivity. Globally, they're playing a vital role in the early recognition of H5 bird flu, and we need more of them. We are crying out for them in the regions. The Australian Veterinary Association's latest workforce survey found that 36% of veterinary recruitment vacancies took 12 months or longer to fill, and in regional areas this number jumps to 44%. Veterinary students need to complete 52 weeks of mandatory unpaid placement. So expanding Commonwealth prac payments to include veterinary students is a simple, practical way to support students, just as we're doing in the health sciences, to complete their degrees and address what is an absolutely manifestly problematic critical workforce shortage in rural and regional Australia. The impacts of placement poverty caused by mandatory unpaid placements has been well established, as have the need for policies that grow our health and veterinary workforce. So knowing this, it's unclear to me what metric the government used to deem some students more deserving of Commonwealth prac payments than others. I congratulate the government on taking an important step in supporting more allied health students to complete their degrees, and I call on them, don't stop there. Students in medical, veterinary, dentistry and the remaining health degrees also deserve a fair chance at completing their studies, and we need them. I've said so many times in this place, healthcare is a team sport. We need our full team able to participate. This practical placement policy is a solid policy. It's a common sense policy. It is supported by the community. And I know it is already helping to secure Australia's future in health. We need to make sure it's expanded to those other professions, and we absolutely need to get our vets involved in this too.
And I thank the member for Indi. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Bonner.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, imagine knowing that to complete your degree or training, you need to stop earning an income, not for a day or two, but for weeks and sometimes even months. You still have rent to pay, you still have groceries, petrol, looking after kids, childcare fees, but you also have hundreds of hours of mandatory unpaid placement ahead of you, and without completing it, you don't graduate. That has been the reality for far too many Australian students. We've heard today many stories about what this means for students. It has meant choosing, sometimes between the qualification they have worked years towards and simply being able to pay their bills. We have heard from students cutting back shifts, burning through their savings, having to give up their jobs, or worse still, giving up their degree or training entirely. Labor is changing that. Deputy Speaker, in 2024, Labor announced paid prac, the type of policy that only a Labor government would make. And for the first time, the Australian government helped eligible students with the cost of living with paid prac while they completed their mandatory placements they needed to graduate. This was a fundamental change, and now we're taking the next step. From 1 July 2027, Labor is expanding paid prac to 10 more frontline health professions: clinical psychology, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech pathology, paramedicine, radiography, pharmacy, rehabilitation therapies, audiology and podiatry. Deputy Speaker, if we think about how often Australians rely on these professions throughout their lives,
It paints a picture of how important these professions are to our society. The paramedic who arrives on what might be the very worst day in that person's life. The physio helping you to walk again after surgery. The speech pathologist working with a child to find their voice. These professions matter and we need more people choosing them. In my electorate of Bonner, around 12,000 people already work in healthcare and social assistance. And in the last census, more than 4,500 Bonner residents worked in hospitals alone. And almost 9,000 people were studying at university or another higher education institution. Behind those numbers are thousands of people building careers and providing the services that families across my community depend on. And among those almost 9,000 students is the next generation of our health workforce. Deputy Speaker, we want students to graduate, we want them to take up these jobs, but when we ask them to complete enormous amounts of unpaid practical training to get there, we limit their opportunity. For radiography students, practical training can add up to more than a year to their degree. Try fitting that around a normal work week. Deputy Speaker, we cannot keep saying Australia needs more skilled health professionals while putting the financial barriers in the way of people trying to become them. Pay prac is about removing one of those barriers, but it is also part of something much bigger, because a stronger Medicare isn't about just what we fund, it's about who is there to deliver. You can invest in hospitals, you can open clinics, you can expand services, but ultimately somebody has to be there to provide the care. Australia needs these students and we need to support them. Labor understands this, that is why we created paid prac and it's why we're expanding it. It is all part of the government's commitment to a better future for all Australians. Paid prac is good cost of living policy, it is good education policy, and it's good health policy. Most importantly, it backs Australians who are putting in the work to build a better future for themselves and who will spend their careers looking after the rest of us. Only Labor values these students, and we will continue to deliver and expand paid prac to support them.
And I thank the member for Bonner. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Cowper.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I'd like to give credit where it's due in this place and commend the upcoming expansion of the Commonwealth prac payment. Any initiative that responsibly encourages our locally grown health workforce is to be commended and implemented as quickly as possible. So I take my hat off to the government for this policy. But this bill gives me an opportunity to make a further plea today on behalf of regional communities to go one step further and recognise the sectors of the health workforce that the current expansion ignores. Sectors that we in the regions desperately need to be nurturing and increasing in numbers. On this side of the floor, we absolutely welcome the inclusion of clinical psychology, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech pathology, paramedicine, radiography, pharmacy, rehabilitation therapies, audiology and podiatry. But that list just needs to be a little larger, and it should include medical students, those studying to be a GP or a specialist. It should include optometry. It should include dietitians and should include veterinary students. As you would expect in regional and rural areas, our GP shortage is rapidly getting worse with every single passing year. Finding a timely appointment with a GP in my electorate on the mid-north coast of New South Wales has never been harder and is currently forcing residents in need into emergency departments. And while the urgent care clinic in Coffs Harbour is a welcome addition, they need one in Taree, it isn't open to the hours that we were promised when it was launched because of staff shortages. We know that the pipeline of new graduates replacing our existing GP network is almost non-existent, and we need to address this immediately to ensure that our primary care network doesn't further erode. But sadly, that would-be workforce is not included in this expansion, making general practice less appealing for students struggling with those expenses. Not every medical industry body is passionately pointing this out to us. None more eloquently than the RAC GP President Michael Wright, who stated, and I quote, that on-the-job training is what has given us such expert clinicians all around this country. But this unpaid training places a major financial burden on many medical students. Placements can really act as a barrier for some of our brightest students choosing to go into medicine, and it's particularly hard for people from disadvantaged populations, people in rural areas, and people with lower socio-economic groups. Excuse me. Out of all of these courses, the medical degree is the longest, and the impact of these placements on finances are the greatest for future doctors, so excluding them from this just doesn't make any sense. And then there's the allied health fields like optometry and dietitians. To best illustrate this, I want to read from a letter that I received from Poppy McIntyre from Port Macquarie. Poppy's an 18-year-old full-time pharmacy student at the University of Sydney, and she writes, I know from experience that for many allied health students, the greatest financial hardship occurs during mandatory clinical placements. These placements often require students to reduce or completely stop paid work while continuing to meet the cost of rent, transport, food and study, placing many under severe financial stress. I was pleased to see that the recent expansion of the Commonwealth PRAC payment to support more allied health students during mandatory placements, including me, for pharmacy. But I was disappointed that other students in other essential allied health disciplines remain excluded from this support, an exclusion that is hard to justify given the placement requirements of these degrees. Dietitians are required to complete more than 800 hours of unpaid clinical placement, while optometry students typically take 400 to 600 hours of unpaid placement before they can graduate. A financial burden that can be overwhelming and has the potential to discourage students from entering. She goes on, I respectfully urge you to advocate for the Commonwealth PRAC payment to be extended to include dietitians, optometry and allied health students. And Poppy, I couldn't have said it better myself.
And I thank the member for Cowper. The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business. Notice number 3, a motion on the National Wild Dog Action Plan to be moved by the member for Gippsland.
I give the call to the Leader of the Nationals in the House, the member for Gippsland.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to the National Wild Dog Action Plan, the terms on which it appears on the notice paper. Deputy Speaker, I move this motion on behalf of our world-class livestock producers in Gippsland and throughout regional Australia. Wild dogs are one of the clearest examples of Labor governments at state and federal level failing to support our farmers when pressure on them is actually increasing. Now, this isn't a fringe issue, Deputy Speaker. It goes to the heart of what regional communities expect from Canberra, which is certainty and action on the ground. Put simply, Deputy Speaker, we need more boots and less suits. That's more boots on the ground doing practical environmental work and less suits in Canberra and Melbourne making excuses. Now, wild dog predation costs Australian livestock producers in the order of $302 million a year in production costs. Now, those opposite may say this is primarily a state issue. And frankly, Deputy Speaker, that is dodging their responsibility, because while the state governments should not be let off the hook, there are very significant national issues that need to be dealt with in this place when it comes to invasive species. When it comes to national food security, we have to be working with the state governments and our landholders to protect them from losses associated with predators like wild dogs. When it comes to feeding the rest of the world with our imports, we need to make sure that our farmers can continue to produce that world-class protein that I referred to earlier. And when it comes to invasive species, there needs to be some leadership in this place, in Canberra, to make sure we continue to keep the pressure on those species which are damaging the agricultural sector and our biodiversity, because our farmers cannot be expected to tackle these problems by themselves, particularly when it comes to wild dogs, which are emerging primarily from public land, whether it be national parks or state forests or some other form of Crown land. The worst neighbour to have in many of our communities is a public land manager run by the state governments. Wild dogs simply don't stop at the border of public land, and they don't stop at a state border. Now, the other point I want to make, Deputy Speaker, in relation to this issue before the House today, this is also a mental health issue. Farmers and farming families are dealing with this issue on top of all of their other day-to-day tasks. On every other difficult issue they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, trying to manage the regulation, trying to make sure they make a profit, dealing with seasonal conditions. On top of that, they then have to protect their stock from predation by wild dogs emerging from public land. In electorates like Gippsland, which have many farms surrounded by public land, this is an ongoing challenge. And I want to refer to one of my constituents, Stuart from Benambra, a fifth-generation farmer from Benambra, and he wrote to me and said, quote, "Given all the regular issues and struggles we deal with in this industry, we certainly can't afford the time and cost of this dog issue getting out of hand again." And he went on to say, "Thankfully, I'm not particularly susceptible to mental health issues, but I was absolutely furious this morning when I found a gutted lamb. That could take a toll potentially in future. It's hard to know." Now, Deputy Speaker, the reason I'm raising this in the federal parliament is because federal funding for the National Wild Dog Management Coordinator expires at the end of September this year, and funding for the National Wild Dog Action Plan expires a month after that. We are yet to hear from the government, from the Albanese government, whether we'll continue to fund those two important roles. Industry is seeking a federal commitment of just $250,000 a year over 5 years to keep the coordinated role and the action plan running. Again, in the context of a $302 million per year annual cost to livestock producers, that is a tiny amount of money to assist our world-class farming families. Now, Deputy Speaker, I want to close by referencing one of our peak bodies, National Farmers Federation, just to demonstrate that this has got nothing to do with party politics. When you have peak leadership groups in the farming sector on board with an issue, I call on the government to pay attention. The National Farmers Federation President Hamish McIntyre has said, and I quote, "Wild dogs are especially cruel killers, often leaving livestock to suffer slow, painful deaths from their bites, and that we're only halfway through a 10-year management plan. There's still a lot of important work to be done." McIntyre also said regarding the September deadline, "It's vital that the national coordinator is reinstated come September. If funding isn't renewed, we'll be undoing more than a decade of progress." Deputy Speaker, we simply can't afford to go backwards. This motion is not asking for something radical. It asks the government to keep doing what it was already funding previously and what has been working in terms of other major pest species around the nation. Farmers have done their part. Industry has done its part by committing to co-funding. It's time for the government to do its part.
I thank the member. Is there a seconder for this motion? I call the member for Ford. Member for Nicholas.
I second the motion and reserve my right. Thank you.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Ford.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I guess I just want to answer the question that some people might have: is why is a member for an outer metro seat between in Logan and the Northern Gold Coast, between Brisbane and the Gold Coast, getting up to speak on this? And there are two reasons that I want to do that. One is because I never want to miss an opportunity in this place to let people know where I come from, to let people know what my roots are. And I think the experiences which really drive my values are the ones that I learnt working as a station hand around on outback sheep and cattle stations around Broken Hill. In fact, a couple hundred k's west of Bourke, around a little town called Winaring. And the second reason that I want to talk about this motion today is because I'm probably one of the few people in this place and who may ever be in this place who is able to actually give testimony to what happened when the dog fence fell apart in Western New South Wales, because I was there. And when the member for Gippsland talks about the federal government not having an interest in what goes on out there, I can tell you, as somebody who was actually there in Western New South Wales when the dog fence fell apart in the early 2000s, that it was the Liberal government, the Liberal National government, who was in power at the time. So, you know, when it comes to neglect, I think that they need to take a hard look at themselves and look at the fact the fact that they're actually responsible for it. Because I was there, working there, as much as the member Barker has a little chuckle. I was actually working on the land and saw it fall apart in a couple of, really in the space of two years or so. And I guess in many ways it was the drought, the millennial drought around that sort of 2000, where we had over the course of, I think, a year, I can remember one year, can't remember which year, 2000, 2001, I think we had about 180 points under the old system, which is just below 2 inches for 12 months. And the sheep and the place that I worked a lot on was for a family that owned four places, which combined added up to about 300,000 or so acres. They ran, when I got there, about 15,000 sheep across those 4 places. And by the end of the millennial drought, there was about 2,000. So the drought knocked them down, but the broken fence kept them down. And in that space of the time, from when they had 15,000, the millennial drought lasted particularly harshly for about 2 or 3 years. By the end of that, 2,000 sheep, the dogs had moved in. And it was the dog problem that prevented them from restocking. And so in many ways, I got to work on sheep and cattle stations, but after me, they were cattle stations. And really, that Western New South Wales has barely recovered. And I think that really why I wanted to talk about this is because, without listing all of the things that the Albanese government is doing around biosecurity or agriculture, without really trumpeting the fact that we are actually investing in a wild dog management plan, $20 million or so, and the fact that we do have the interest of our farmers at heart, as I say, families that really give me the values that I stand to represent in this place today. That I think that we have in the Albanese government a complete change of philosophy. The reason why the Howard government let the fence collapse and the Albanese government is about rebuilding our fences, our industries, is a change of philosophy. It's the same philosophy that is driving us to support our steel industry in Whyalla, our aluminium industry in Gladstone, our copper industry in Mount Isa, and just the other day, our aluminium industry in Tomago. It is a philosophy that nobody held back and nobody left behind. And while the previous philosophy of the Howard government and the Abbott, Turnbull and Morrison governments was summed up best in their philosophy to daring the car industry to walk out, whether it is in agriculture, whether it is in manufacturing, whether it is in mining, this Albanese Labor government has a philosophy of protecting those industries and looking after our farmers and our workers, and really trying to fix the mess that we have been left with after 30 years of neglect. And so I condemn this motion, really, because I think that it hides the fact, it hides the history, and I can tell that from a personal perspective because I was there.
I thank the member for Ford. The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Nichols.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to support the motion moved by the member for Gippsland. And there is a lack of commitment by the Albanese government to the management of wild dogs. And I appreciate the member for Ford giving us his experience. And on behalf of the constituents and the farmers that I represent, I will appreciate the member for Ford advocating for the $250,000 a year that the industry is seeking. He said how important it is, and I look forward to him going and advocating that to the Minister for Agriculture. Deputy Speaker, wild dog predation costs Australian livestock producers an estimated $302 million every year in production losses. And I have been a livestock producer in my life, and I have seen what wild dogs can do to the livestock that I was caring for. And it's a very distressing thing, It's not just the financial. People become emotionally attached to their livestock. Farmers cannot tackle this problem alone. Wild dogs are continually moving across neighbouring land national parks or Crown land. They don't stop at state borders, they don't stop at the boundary of a national park, and they certainly don't stop at the boundary of a farmer's property. Deputy Speaker, wild dogs are one part of a much bigger invasive species challenge facing Australian agriculture. Feral pigs is another example of the same pattern, animals moving through national parks and Crown land and onto productive farmland. And it's the same with wild dogs. Individual farmers left to shoulder the cost of a problem that crosses land tenure and state boundaries. Now, the New South Wales Coalition's $300 million biosecurity and feral animal package responds to this problem with a feral pig bounty trial, aerial shooting, drone surveillance, 5-year funding cycles and clear obligations on Crown land managers to pull their weight. Now, if federal funding for the National Wild Dog Management Coordinator expires at the end of September 2026, so that's why it's timely that the member for Gippsland gets up and moves this motion that's going to be supported by the member for Barker, because we understand how bad the problem is and the role that the federal government has to play. We are only halfway through a 10-year management plan and the government is walking away right when the continuity of this program matters most. And here's the kicker. The funding required is such a modest ask. Industry is seeking a federal commitment of $250,000 a year over 5 years to keep the coordinator role and the action plan running. That's a very small amount of money against a $302 million annual cost to the sector. And multiple industry bodies have already committed to the co-funding of the program, but government has not managed this commitment. And the farmers and the industry, and really on behalf of the people who love the products of Australian livestock, shouldn't have to go cap in hand to this government begging to properly fund invasive species management. It should be a part of what we all agree is the responsibility of, partially the responsibility of government. So the Albanese government is treating wild dog management as the responsibility of states, territories and landholders alone. They've cut important pest and invasive species management programs despite growing economic impact of invasive species on agriculture. The federal government already funds national coordinators for feral pigs, deer, rabbits, cats and foxes. Why would we treat the problem of wild dogs differently to those species that I just outlined? In many cases, they cause a much bigger problem. So if the government is serious about supporting regional Australia and protecting food security and managing invasive species, and I reiterate what the member for Gippsland said, practical environmentalism such as this needs more boots and less suits. Boots on the ground, proper practical environmentalism, and less bureaucrats in places like Sydney, Melbourne and Canberra talking about what should be done. So if the government's serious about supporting regional Australia, it must and it needs to properly fund the Wild Dog Action Plan, $250,000 a year, and I really look forward, given that he's outlined how much of an expert he is on this, the member for Ford going over to the Minister for Agriculture and saying, on behalf of the Australian farmers, we, the Labor Party, need to get this done. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member for Nichols. The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Hunter.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to thank my good friend, the member for Gippsland, for bringing this motion before the House. There is a lot that I actually do agree with in this motion. Our livestock producers make an enormous contribution to this country. They put food on our tables, they support regional jobs, and they keep local economies moving. In the Hunter, we know that firsthand from cattle properties around Lake Macquarie, Cessnock, Singleton and smaller communities across our electorate. Agriculture is part of who we are. These producers work bloody hard. They get up early, they work long days and they deal with drought, floods, rising costs, changing markets and pests. Wild dogs are another challenge they shouldn't have to face alone. When a wild dog attacks livestock, it's not just a number on a spreadsheet. It's an animal that a farmer has raised, it's lost income, and it's hours and hours of extra work. And a lot of farmers, it's extremely upsetting to walk past into a paddock and see what's just happened. So I agree with the member for Gippsland that wild dogs are a serious issue and that they do need coordinated control measures. But I don't accept the suggestion that the Albanese Labor government has walked away from pest management and biosecurity. The Commonwealth has invested more than $20 million to support wild dog management through the National Wild Dog Action Plan. We've also provided a $650,000 grant to Australian Wool Innovation through the Supporting Communities Managed Pest, Animals and Weeds program to support delivery of that plan. That matters because wild dogs don't care where one property ends and another one begins. They don't care about council boundaries. They don't care about state borders. If one landholder is doing the right thing, but the property next door isn't involved in the program, the problem doesn't disappear. That's why farmers, governments, researchers and industry need to all actually work together. In our region, coordination matters because a wild dog can move through rough country and across multiple properties. No single farmer, no matter how hard they work, can solve this problem alone. And that's exactly the sort of approach that works in places like the Hunter, where you've got farms, bushland, national parks and difficult country sitting alongside each other. This government also understands that biosecurity is bigger than any one pest. Since 2022, we've invested more than $2 billion in an additional biosecurity funding. That money is strengthening prevention, detection, response and recovery right across this country. We've invested in frontline biosecurity. We've backed preparedness for H5 bird flu. We've supported responses to the red imported fire ants. We're making sure our system is ready for the threats that can hurt our farmers, our environment and our economy. Why does that matter, Speaker? Because Australian agriculture is something worth protecting. Farm gate production was on track to exceed $100 billion last financial year, 4 years ahead of the industry's 2030 target. And that doesn't happen by accident, Speaker. It happens because Australian farmers are among the best in the world. It happens because our produce is clean, safe and trusted. And it happens because governments, industry and farmers work together to protect that reputation. I also want to recognise the burden that pest control puts on individual landholders. A farmer in the Hunter already has enough to do with without spending more time and money dealing with wild dogs. They need support, they need practical information, they need neighbours working together and they need governments at every level doing their part. State and territories have the primary responsibility for managing established pests, animals on the ground, but Commonwealth has an important role in coordination, research and national leadership. We'll keep playing that role, we'll keep working with states and territories, we'll keep working with the industry and most importantly, we'll keep listening to the farmers who deal with these problems every single day. There might be a political disagreement in this place about individual programs or where funding should sit. That's fine. But there shouldn't be a disagreement about the goal. We want fewer livestock lost to wild dogs. We want stronger regional communities. We want productive farms. And we want a biosecurity system that protects Australian agriculture for the long term. The farmers of the Hunter don't want speeches full of politics. They want practical results. That's what we'll keep fighting for and that's what this government will keep delivering. Thank you, Speaker.
I thank the member for Hunter. The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree with the statement the member for Hunter made that we should listen to our farmers. And so to the member for Hunter, listen up, because me and my family farm, as does the member for Grey, and in my case, we're livestock producers. And so when the beginning of this motion acknowledges the significant contribution Australian livestock producers make to regional economies, you've got me interested. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is a special kind of torment that comes with a farmer knowing that there is a wild dog predating on their livestock. They go to bed at night praying that that dog isn't going to come back because the scene isn't a dead lamb here or a dead ewe over there. It is a massacre. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've seen it, and not much curdles my blood, but it does. Not one ewe, not one lamb, but we're talking about entire flocks, because when a wild dog gets that taste, it doesn't stop. It's not killing because it needs to eat, it's killing for fun. and quite frankly, the scene doesn't bear thinking about. And that's why our nation has always taken a particularly important role for the National Wild Dog Action Plan, because farmers at home are sitting at home worried about their livestock. Livestock they care about, livestock they've spent a small fortune acquiring or breeding, but also a small fortune supporting, whether through treatments or other things. And so when I hear those opposite say we don't want to hear any more speeches about how important this is, I couldn't agree more. But then I think to myself, hang on, between the saying and the doing is the ocean between. Because on the one hand, we hear these lovely speeches. I heard one from the member for Hunter. I heard one from the member for Ford. People who are trotted out in this place to pretend like those opposite have an affinity with rural regional producers, because whilst they live in rural communities, or have in the case of the member for Ford, haven't been producers. The truth is, I then think to myself, hang on, 250 grand? I mean, with respect, there are departments in this government's orbit that spend more in petty cash. And quite frankly, to think that this is now at a point where this funding is uncertain, I quite frankly can't understand. This is an economy that contributes $302 million annually to the economy. Those opposite are very quick to drape themselves in the imagery of rural Australia and these things, but you have to actually back it up with words, with actions, not just words. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to suggest, contrary to what those opposite have suggested, that the current government, Madam Deputy Speaker, is biased against agriculture. And how do I say that? I'm a former barrister. I need to be able to prove things. Let me start with banning live sheep exports. That wasn't a pro-farmer move, I don't think, Madam Deputy Speaker. I could then back it up by saying water buybacks in the Murray-Darling Basin. That's not a pro-farmer move, quite frankly. I could keep going if you like. Sorry, a member for Grey, we're freelancing here, so what's your suggestion? Free trade is not free trade. Well, that's right. So there are many examples here that I can point to of those opposite acting against the interests of farmers, and this is just another example. And you know, the member for Ford wanted to wax lyrical about the dog fence. Well, before the member for Grey served in this place, I worked with the former member for Grey to secure $29 million to re-establish the dog fence across northern South Australia, protecting much of the member for Grey's seat, but in turn protecting mine, because quite frankly, my livestock producers want the front line in this fight to be a long way from where they are. As opposed to the Victorian Labor government, who quite frankly, and this should take your breath away, as a livestock producer from South Australia, can I tell you it does mean the reintroduction of dingoes in the Grampians. The reintroduction of dingoes in the Grampians. So those opposite want to say they're backing livestock producers. Well, there's 250,000 ways you can do that shortly, as opposed to the $29 million we contribute to the wild dog fence, and this idea that all of my colleagues know that the idea of the reintroduction of the dingo is a very bad idea, close to sheep enterprises.
I thank the member for Barker. The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made an order of the day for the next sitting. I call the clerk.
Private members' notice number 4 relating to the key apprenticeship program, standing in the name of the member for Moore.
I call the member for Moore.
I move the motion relating to the key apprenticeship program in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Deputy Speaker, I rise to move this motion because the key apprenticeship program gets a basic part of the apprenticeship policy right. If we want more qualified tradies, we need to help apprentices stay in the trade long enough to finish. And we need to make it easier for businesses, especially small businesses, to take them on in the first place. I started my electrical apprenticeship at 25. The wages were not great. And I know some people might laugh at the idea of an electrician ever being poorly paid. But every electrician starts somewhere, and most of us started on pretty modest wages. And that is one of the reasons these payments are pretty useful. I received a similar apprenticeship incentive myself. It did not suddenly make the apprentice wages generous, but it helped with the costs that come with staying in the trade. Tools, fuel, getting to work. Did I spend every dollar wisely at 25? Probably not. A trip to Bali may have entered the equation, but take Aaron, a first-year electrical apprentice from Connolly in my electorate of Moore. He wanted to do a trade and his family encouraged him to do electrical. Clearly the superior trade, with all due respect to the member for Hunter. Aaron says he plans to put his payment towards tools. Clearly, he has shown better judgment than I did, but the current program gives apprentices support at key points through their apprenticeship with help with things like tools, transport, and the everyday cost of getting to work. And that support can make a real difference. There will be times when money is tight, and there will be days when the work is hard, and there will be times when someone looks at what their mates are earning elsewhere and wonder whether it is worth sticking out your apprenticeship. And that pressure can build really quickly. It can affect stress, confidence, and mental health. Getting someone into an apprenticeship is only the start. The real success is getting them through the qualification. The early signs of this program are encouraging, with the overwhelming majority of supported apprentices still in training. But apprentices are only one side of this. There is no apprenticeship without an employer willing to give someone a start. And for small business, that is a real commitment. A first-year apprentice needs supervision. A qualified tradie has to stop what they are doing, explain the job, show them how to do it, watch them do it, and then check the work. Sometimes you can spend half an hour explaining a 10-minute job and then 10 minutes fixing it. Every tradie has been there, but that is how apprentices learn. But for a small contractor, that time costs money, and a business can spend years training someone who either does not finish or moves on soon after they qualify. And that is why these employer payments in this program are also small business incentives. They help remove some of the cost and risk of taking on an apprentice. The government is focusing more on that support on small and medium businesses and group training organisations, where those incentives can have the biggest effect on hiring decisions. The same principle applies to TAFE. The cost of a formal apprentice sits, the cost of formal training sits with the employer. So when government makes apprentice TAFE free, that is an employer incentive. It removes another cost from taking on someone and training them. I saw how quickly those costs can grow. When I started my apprenticeship, TAFE and private college in WA were around $1,000. By the time I finished, they had more than tripled under the former Liberal government in Western Australia. For a large company, that increase might be easier to absorb. But for a small contractor taking on 1 or 2 apprentices, it is another cost that has to be weighed up. And removing that cost makes the decision easier. And we need more businesses making that decision, because we cannot build more homes, major infrastructure, and deliver the energy transition without more tradies. And this program has already backed tens of thousands of apprentices in housing construction, including thousands in Western Australia. The opposition is free to criticise it, but its own shadow minister has called the program wrong and accused the government of throwing good money after bad. If that is their position, then they should explain what they would do instead. At the moment, it is all sauce, no sausage roll, because the choice is pretty simple. We can make it harder for businesses to train the next generation, or we can remove the barriers that stand in their way. We can leave apprentices to carry the financial pressure on their own, or we can give them the support they need to help them finish. I know what it means finishing an apprenticeship can give someone: a trade, a career, and opportunities you probably cannot see when you're standing there as a first-year apprentice.
I thank the member for Moore. Is there a seconder for this motion?
I second the motion and make my rights.
I thank the member for Deakin. The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Gray.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to thank every Australian currently doing an apprenticeship. They are learning the skills that build our houses, run the mines, feed us and keep the lights on in this country. But again, this motion does not ask the House to congratulate apprentices. it also has to congratulate the government. Does anyone really think this government deserves being congratulated on this matter? Labor talks a big game on apprenticeships and training, but when you peek behind their points, look at the data. It tells a very different story. When the Coalition left office in 2022, there were 426,000 Australians in apprenticeships and traineeships. That number today? 282,000. 282,000. That's not a pipeline, that is a drain. Trade occupants alone are down 30,000 since Labor came to government. In data released by the National Centre for Vocational Education Research, training and apprenticeship commencements are down in 18 out of 19 industries under Labor. Construction, down. Manufacturing, down. Healthcare, down. Mining, down. Agriculture, forestry and fishing, down. The list goes on. But Speaker, in what must be a proud moment for those opposite, there is one industry where commencements are growing. Public administration. Because when they can't grow the economy, the only solution they have is to grow the public sector. Labor's record on skills and training is worth remembering, and it is worth comparing. Apprentice and trainee numbers almost doubled under the Howard government. When Rudd and Gillard came to government, they went into freefall. Before those opposite came to government, they were doing everything they could to spin a story and misrepresent the facts on apprenticeships and traineeships. So much that even the ABC fact-checkers took a look. And this is what they had to say about Labor's record. And here I quote, Speaker, the fall in traineeship was, in fact, larger under 1 year of Labor than under the first 7 years of coalition government. After 6 years of chaos under Kevin Rudd and Julie Gillard, the coalition inherited trainee and apprenticeship numbers in freefall. And what did the coalition government do? Well, we delivered. $2.4 billion in upskilled apprenticeships, $3.7 billion for skills training, 800,000 supported trainee places under the National Skills Agreement. That's why when we left office, the number of Australians in apprenticeships and traineeships reached 426,000. Under Labor, it has declined year after year after year. And here they are trying to congratulate themselves. The record is clear, Speaker. Labor spin the truth. They spin the narrative while the coalition delivers for Australians. The Labor government has put more than $1.5 billion into fee-free TAFE and have somehow managed to get fewer Australians into apprenticeships and traineeships. Go figure. And disappointingly, like most things this government does, regional, rural and remote Australians get bugger all. Take Coober Pedy, the opal city of the world, a town with a proud history that has been forgotten by the Canberra bubble bureaucrats. They might have a TAFE building, but they have no pathway into the industry that built the town and sustains the town. Coober Pedy is half the size than it was 30 years ago. And sadly, this isn't a unique case in regional, rural and remote South Australia. Regional, rural and remote Australians have been forgotten for too long under this government. This government needs to start backing the engine room of our nation, and it needs to start now.
And I thank the member for Grey. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Blair.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Moore for this excellent motion. As someone who was an employer for 20 years before I came into this place, I know how important it is to get and give a person a job. It really makes a huge difference. It changes their whole life, changes their lifestyle, their livelihood, and provides financial security for them and their family. Now, like everyone on this side of the chamber, the member for Moore understands just how critical it is that we pull all the range of levers to ensure that more homes are built for Australia. In June this year, the Minister for Skills and Training and I visited a building site in Ipswich, in my fast-growing electorate, to meet with some first-year apprentices, including several female apprentices from the local group training organisation Apprenticeships Queensland, who are celebrating 40 years of supporting skills and training in the Ipswich region this year. Now, these young people are completing their apprenticeships in carpentry and roof plumbing and renovating a beautiful old Queenslander-style home for which Ipswich is famous, as it is the heritage capital of Queensland. They provided a lot of work, these Queenslanders, I might add, for tradespeople. I saw the Minister was out this morning meeting with a local builder and his carpentry apprentice here in Canberra. But when he visited my electorate of Blair a couple of months ago, he dropped into a house at Carralee as well to meet with solar panel business Alpha Bright Solar owner Moses. Now, Moses and his electrical apprentice Macbol, who was undertaking a course in training in solar panel installation and maintenance, and they were working at this house at Carralee. All of these apprentices were benefiting from the Albanese government's key apprenticeship program, which provides $10,000 bonuses for an apprentice paid in instalments, backing apprentices like Macbol to start and, more importantly, to finish their apprenticeships. Moses benefits too as an employer because he's among the thousands of small business owners backed by an employer incentive scheme as well. The Albanese government inherited a skills shortage from the former Liberal and National Party government. It was the worst in 50 years, and no protestations over the other side can deny the reality. Together with Australians across the country, our government's working to turn that around. New data shows the Albanese government's commitment to building the workforce for Australia's future is on track, with thousands of apprentices signed up to the housing construction apprenticeship stream of the key apprenticeships program. We now have 32,000 new housing construction apprentices who've signed up to the program in just the first year, more than 7,400 in my home state of Queensland. That's 32,000 Australian apprentices who are backing to build more homes in every corner of the country, including 11,600 more carpentry apprentices, 6,700 more plumbing apprentices, and almost 6,300 more electrical apprentices like Macbol. Indeed, apprentices in areas of carpentry and joining and electrical trades workers have been the top 3 housing construction occupations for commencement under the program in Queensland, alongside occupations like glaziers, tilers, plasterers, bricklayers and concreters, and more are signing up every week. And we're targeting support through this program to businesses like Moses to take on apprentices and apprenticeships for people like Macbol to become qualified tradespeople. You know, on this side of the chamber, we're helping people to be trained, to build homes, and build homes in my home city of Ipswich. Now, under the former government's untargeted schemes, the former government also ripped billions of dollars in skills and training from TAFE. 60% dropout rate under their former schemes, and the Leader of the Opposition can't even mention the word TAFE. And I noticed that the previous speaker was pouring scorn on TAFE as he was speaking. We know the LNP doesn't support free TAFE, in which we've seen more than 814,000 people in the last 3 years enrol. In Queensland alone, we've seen 134,000 enrolments in free TAFE courses, ranging from construction, trades, as well as high priority areas like nursing, cyber security and disability support. And before the last election, the LNP opposition even threatened to abolish free TAFE. If you listen to the previous speaker, that remains their policy. They need to come clean. Do they support free TAFE and the key apprenticeships program that's delivering to Australian workers, businesses and Australian apprentices? Or do they support what they've said previously, where they were we were allegedly throwing good money after bad? It really makes no sense at all not to back small business and apprenticeships all the way.
And I thank the member for Blair. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Riverina.
Just for the member for Blair's information, I support technical and further education. TAFE is a great pathway for young people in particular, but many people of many ages besides, to get into employment. This Wednesday, and just for the record, I hold a number of TAFE certificates. I'm very proud of that. I do believe that a TAFE certificate is worth every bit as much as a tertiary degree, and we should be applauding it as such. This Wednesday is the first anniversary of the Economic Reform Roundtable, otherwise known as the Productivity Roundtable, which was held in Canberra, in the national capital, from the 19th to the 21st of August last year. And yet, since then, we've actually had a productivity decline. And when we come to this motion brought to the Parliament by the member for Moore, the stark reality is the actual data, the actual numbers. Nationally, 429,000 apprentices and trainees were in training in June 2022. Now, that's just after Labor was elected to office. Labor closed the funding. Numbers have fallen every year since. Now, this data is from the National Centre for Vocational Education Research. Total apprentices and trainees in training fell 11.3% across the country in the 12 months to June 2025. Trade apprenticeship commencements are down 15.3% nationally in the 12 months to June 2025. Non-trade commencements fell 13.9% in the year to December 2024, and the Centre directly attributed this to the closure of the Boosting Apprenticeships commencements, that scheme that was making some sort of difference. Now, in September 2024, trade commencements fell 17.4% nationally, construction down 18.6%, automotive and engineering down 18%. They're not my numbers. These are the numbers from this centre, which also stated that apprenticeship job postings nationally fell 27% in 2024, now tracking below pre-pandemic 2019 levels. And that is a real worry. And it's a real worry when Labor is talking up building 1 million homes. That number has changed, has varied. But when Labor talks about building the houses for the future, for the migrants, for young people, first home buyers, whatever the case might be, and we have the housing industry Australia estimating an additional 83,000 tradies would be required to meet Labor's housing target, then those two figures simply don't match. And what we've also seen is the construction industry in freefall. The building industry is one of the hardest hit sectors at the moment. Another one is the transport sector, but in the building industry, there were almost 3,500 insolvencies in that sector in 2025-2026. Now, this has to stop. And Labor talks about fee-free TAFE all the time. It's almost job-free TAFE at the moment because we've got the transport sector in freefall, we've got the construction sector hit like never before. And then, of course, we've got Labor members talking about the need to build 1 million new homes, whilst at the same time absolutely smashing our real estate market, absolutely smashing the property market, and then taking pride in that, taking pride in the fact that our housing market is slumping, that the prices are coming down, that they suggest and claim and proclaim that indeed it's never been a better time for a first home buyer. Well, I tell you what, there have been a lot better times for our TAFE apprentices, for those people who, whether they're in carpentry or an electrical trade or whatever the case, it must be a worry because they're there going to TAFE, they might be learning on the job at the same time, but what future do they have? When we see the number of bankruptcies, insolvencies in the construction sector, and then they might tune in to Question Time, they might tune in to Parliament, and they hear Labor members talking about the property market, but Labor members talking up what are fudged figures, because they are. And this disaster is Labor's own making. This disaster, this productivity freefall, is on Labor's watch. There is a better way, it's the coalition way.
I thank the member for Riverina. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Gorton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Tradies are who keep our country moving, and I'm so proud to represent my community in the western suburbs, where high-vis is a normal sight out at the shops. My family is full of tradies. I'm even married to one, a Sparky from Melbourne's West. That's why I'm so proud of the Albanese Labor government's focus on supporting tradies while they build the homes that our country needs. And we're doing this in a number of ways, Deputy Speaker, and I'm so glad that the member for Riverina raised the very important issue of TAFE. First and foremost, it is a Labor government who has invested in free TAFE, and now we've made it permanent. That's right, free TAFE is here to stay, helping more Aussies get better jobs with higher wages. And we're doing that for at least 100,000 free TAFE and vet students per year from 2027, underpinned by the Free TAFE Act 2025. My family is the way it is because of free TAFE, Deputy Speaker. My husband Chris was able to make a career change later in life because of Labor's free TAFE. He's now a mature-age electrical apprentice in his third year, studying at Victoria University Sunshine TAFE, Deputy Speaker. He loves what he does with the team at Rizzo Electrical Consulting in Airport West, a third-generation business in the northwest of Melbourne. In Victoria, free TAFE has close to almost 150,000 enrolments since the start of the program. This has real impacts, putting thousands of Victorians on a pathway to jobs in nursing, construction, aged care, and the tech and early childhood education sectors as well. It's real savings. For a Victorian training in a diploma for building and construction, free TAFE means savings of up to about $15,000. We've also increased the living away from home allowance for tradies. My cousin Nash grew up in the western suburbs. He's a qualified plumber and is currently moved to live up in Yarrawonga for work. He's living in a share house with other workers and apprentices who are working with the agricultural sorting machinery. Moving away from work can create a real financial burden that you otherwise wouldn't have to bear. If you have to move away from home, your parents or your guardian's home, to start or continue training as an Australian apprentice, you may be eligible to receive the Living Away from Home allowance to help you with the cost of living and being away. Our government is committed to supporting tradies like Nash, which is why we've upped this payment for all Australians. We've also wiped 20% off all student debt. And this isn't just university debt like HECS, but all debt that includes apprenticeship support and vet student loans as well. Our 20% cut to student debt has meant more than $500 million saved from vet and student loans and Australian apprenticeship support loan balances. And it's there to give vet students and apprentices a leg up when they enter the workforce. No applications or forms needed, just real cost of living relief. And then there's the Key Apprenticeship program, which is already making a real difference in attracting new apprentices to housing construction, driving Aussies towards the jobs we need to be building more homes for our growing communities and setting up our apprentices for success. And we know this is working. In the first year since its launch on the 1st of July 2025, more than 32,000 apprentices commenced in housing construction trades under the program. Unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, not all sides of this chamber have seen the success of the program for what it is. The Liberals neglected our apprenticeship system for over a decade. Labor inherited the worst skills shortage Australia has seen in 50 years after a decade of Liberal neglect. They ripped billions from TAFE and training and blew $7 million on untargeted schemes like Hamburger University, which saw dropout rates as high as 60%, while critical trades were ignored. The Shadow Minister for Skills and Training called our Key Apprenticeship program inflationary and wrong and not the answer. Tell that to the tradies in my community in Melbourne's western suburbs. Tell that to the tradies around the country who are receiving $10,000 cash payments to help apprentices become the carpenters, the plumbers and the sparkies we'll need in the future, who are staying in trades, who are seeing their futures change thanks to Labor's free TAFE, because that's what building Australia's future looks like, and delivering real change, helping young people get ahead and skilling up our workforce into the future.
I thank the member for Gorton. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for McPherson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I represent an electorate that has quite a broad tradie population, and they contribute immensely to our community on the Gold Coast. We represent an area that is it's experiencing one of the fastest periods of growth across the country, and we see it daily. And people who are in the trade sector are the ones who enable us to grow and to develop, and that is something that must go it's something that's noteworthy. What I will say, though, Deputy Speaker, is I will mention a figure: $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion is no small amount of money, but that is the amount that the current Albanese government has spent on fee-free TAFE. Now, ordinarily, I'd say we encourage that sort of investment. We encourage investment in the next generation of people who are going to build our homes, especially in the midst of what is quite a concerning housing crisis across our country. But, Deputy Speaker, the point of me speaking on this motion today is because we're seeing a situation where, despite that investment of $1.5 billion, the skills shortage has only worsened. And it's right in that instance for, instead of the government coming in here and moving a motion commending their investment, for them to come here and say, well, is it actually working? Is it an effective use of taxpayer funds? And if not, how can we make it better? And I think it does call for a moment of self-reflection for those on the other side of this place. Deputy Speaker, we've seen apprenticeship completion rates unacceptably low. Over the 4 years of completion rates, we've seen them go down from 50% to 47.9%. And this is at a point where more than 1 in 3 occupations, about 36%, are assessed as being in national shortage. I compare that to when, and I know that those opposite have made comparisons to when the Coalition was in office. Well, if we look at the comparison, when we left office in June of 2022, there were 426,830 apprentices and trainees in training across the country. But today, that number has plummeted to just 282,430 as of December last year. And this means we're seeing fewer skills at a time when this government is putting us through a housing crisis. We're also seeing, and we've seen this in the last budget, overall funding for vet activities has dropped since we're in government. And that's been driven overwhelmingly by the government slashing employer incentives from just over $4 billion to $1.54 billion. And these are the incentives to encourage employers to take on those apprentices. Deputy Speaker, in my electorate, I have the industry school in Robina. Now, the industry school is somewhere I've had the privilege of visiting multiple times, and we're spending time when I go with those younger generations of tradies, the people who will be building our homes in the future. And I'm very proud of that school because they're actually translating education into outcomes. The last I checked, they had about 96% of people walking straight into a job upon graduation. And that's great for our community, it's great for our country, and it's great for them. But what we're seeing with fee-free TAFE more broadly is that they're not adopting a similar model, and we're not going down that path of employment. I think the contribution from the member for Grey earlier was noteworthy, because he mentioned that there's only one area that's actually we're seeing the growth, and that is in public administration. Now, that's not the area that we need to see the growth right now, and it's a testament to the government's priorities that is, in fact, the reality of what's happening. So that $1.5 billion that's being spent by the government could be used more effectively, and it's taxpayer funds that should be used more effectively. We need to have a system that ensures that the skills that are required in this country are supported through our education system. And not just through our education system, but also through our broader policy base. And I note that since the government came to office, only 2.5% of our migration intake and net overseas migration are also in the construction sector. So on all accounts, Deputy Speaker, when it comes to making sure we have the skills needed to face the next generation of Australia, the government's failing, and I'm surprised that they're moving this motion.
Person. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Holt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Homes, homes and more homes. That is what Australians elected our government to deliver. More homes and more Australians able to achieve the dream of owning their own home. But if we are serious about building more homes, we need the people to build them. We need more tradies. That is why I am proud to be a part of Labor government that is investing in TAFE, apprenticeships and vocational education. And I know firsthand just how important TAFE can be. Before coming to this place, I studied at TAFE myself. I know what it's like to walk through those doors, learn practical skills and build a pathway into the workforce. TAFE is not a second best option. It is a pathway to a good career, a secure job, a better future for thousands of Australians. That is why, through our 5-year National Skills Agreement, our government is investing more than $12.6 billion into Australia's vocational education and training sector. We are rebuilding TAFE after a decade of neglect under the former Liberal National Government. Through Free TAFE, we have backed more than 814,000 enrolments in courses critical to Australia's future, including training for tradies, nurses, early childhood educators. Deputy Speaker, these are not just numbers. These are people changing careers. Young Australians learning a trade, people gaining new skills and pursuing new opportunities. But we know that getting people into training is only the beginning. We also need to support people to complete their apprenticeships and enter the workforce. That is why Labor took to the election our key apprenticeship program, providing a $10,000 incentive for new apprentices in housing construction. We listened to apprentices and employers who told us that the cost of starting an apprenticeship can be a real barrier. The tools, the transportation, the expenses that are not always considered when someone decides to take up a trade. Under our program, eligible apprentices receive 5 $2,000 payments over the course of their apprenticeship. It is practical support at the times when apprentices need it the most. And we are backing employers too, with an additional $5,000 incentive for eligible apprenticeships that commence in 2026. Deputy Speaker, in Victoria, this program is already making a real difference. It has supported 2,790 carpentry apprentices, 2,330 electrical apprentices, and 2,447 plumbing apprentices, and more. That is a total of 9,286 students contributing to our state. These are the people who will help build the homes our communities need. Their skills will be needed at every stage of construction. They will turn plans on a page into homes where Australian families can build their lives. According to the Master Builders Australia, just one of these construction tradies will contribute the equivalent of 22 standalone houses over a 30-year career. And yet, the opposition has described Labor's investment in TAFE and the trades as wasteful spending. Their shadow minister has called the key apprenticeship program wrong and said it is throwing good money after bad money. Deputy Speaker, I could not disagree more, because I know what TAFE has given me, and I know what a trade can give someone: practical skills, a career, independence, and the opportunity to build a good life. If we want to build more homes, we need more tradies. If we want more tradies, we need to invest in TAFE. And if we want apprentices to complete their training, we need to support them along the way. That is what the Albanese Labor government is doing. We are investing in our future workforce so that they can build the homes Australia needs. That is something I'm proud to support. I commend the key apprenticeship program to this House, and I want to...
for Holt. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Cowper.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, this private member's bill on the key apprenticeship program is just another example of the spin and the tactical play of the Labor Party of divert, deflect and deny. And they can sit over there and pat themselves on the back and talk about their policies and the supposed 30,000 apprentices that the Key Apprenticeship program has attracted in its first 12 months. And of course, we need those apprenticeships because when Labor came into government in 2022, there were 429,000 apprenticeships. And today we see that's down to 282,000. And we're wondering and scratching our heads why we're not building any houses. And I know why those opposite are not talking about the data or putting it into a percentage, Deputy Speaker, and I'll tell you why. Because the latest data on Australian apprenticeship system released by the National Centre for Vocational Education Research paints a very concerning picture for future skills needed to deliver the priorities in our country. In the 12 months to September 2025, trade apprenticeship commencements are down almost 10%, while non-trade commencements are down over 18%. And new data shows that the completion of construction apprenticeships have fallen to a 5-year low. Coincidentally, 5 years that this government has been in power. And the industry is telling us that Labor is slashing $266 million from apprenticeship incentives for employers, and that will only compound the issue. And I do recall when we were in government, in my first term, that our policy was that an employer was paid 50% of the apprenticeship wage in the first year, and 10% in the second year, and 5% in the third year. And that recognised that apprenticeship tradies are basically unskilled going into their first year. And it gave that confidence to the employer that they would be able to pay for that young apprentice's wage. And I note that the policy of the Labor government is a $5,000 payment to young apprentices. Now that's great, it's good, and I can speak from experience. My two sons, 17 and 19, one's doing an electrical trade and the other one's doing a construction building. And they've both received the payments. And they were both very welcoming of that money. But it doesn't stop the fact that I see many of their mates who have been through either Newman Technical College up in Port Macquarie or going through TAFE, unable to find jobs. My sons were very lucky that they found their jobs and they appreciate it and love them. But the fact is it does not give confidence to employers. It does not want them to bring people on. And we've seen a record number of construction and building companies go into insolvency over the last 18 months to 2 years. And that is reflective of this government's policies. It's reflective of what this government is failing to do. And, Mr Speaker, the other side talk about building homes. But what I can say is that Labor is failing to provide investment into the infrastructure that is needed in regional and rural areas such as Port Macquarie, Kempsey, Coffs Harbour. The infrastructure, the basics, the sewer and water. There has been no new investment. And if you don't have that new investment, then you cannot build. So you can create as many tradies as you like, but without that infrastructure investment, then nothing will happen. And unless you live in a Labor seat, nothing gets done. So I call on Labor to make sure that they treat all Australians equally and leave no one behind as promised.
For Cowper, the question is that the motion be agreed to, and I understand that the member for Pearce would like to present a copy of their speech for incorporation into Hansard in accordance with the resolution agreed to on the 6th of November 2025. And I thank the member for his. The question before the Federation Chamber is that the motion be agreed to, and with the remaining time, I give the call to the member for Petrie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today in strong support of this motion, and I thank the fantastic member for Moore for moving it. Because at its heart, this is about something pretty simple. Australia needs more tradies. We need more carpenters, more plumbers and more electricians. And we need to make sure that Australians who choose those careers, know that their government backs them. For too long, there's been the idea that when you finish school, the pathway to a good career has to mean going to university. And university is a fantastic option for many people, but it is not the only option, and it's not the only option that suits everyone. You can go to TAFE, you can start an apprenticeship, you can earn while you learn, build a great career, start your own business, and one day employ and train the next generation. In my electorate of Petrie, we are fortunate to have TAFE campuses at both Redcliffe and at Bracken Ridge. I want young people across our community to know that walking through the doors of TAFE and learning a trade can open the door to a secure, rewarding and well-paid career. That is why our government established the key apprenticeship program. New apprentices in housing construction can now receive up to $10,000 paid across their apprenticeship to help with the real cost of getting started, buying tools, transport, other equipment that they need to complete their job. And importantly, that support continues as they progress through their apprenticeship, helping more people reach that finish line. Early data shows that around 89% of apprenticeships supported through the program are still in training. In its first year, more than 30,000 apprentices have been backed into the housing construction sector. In Queensland alone, that program has supported more than 7,400 commencements, including more than 3,000 carpentry apprentices. And this is more than just training, it is about housing. We can invest billions into housing, we can release land, we can support first home buyers and build more social and affordable homes. But someone still has to pour the slab, someone has to frame the house, and somebody has to install the plumbing, and someone has to wire it. We cannot build more homes without more tradies. More tradies means more homes. That is why backing apprentices is so important. We are backing young Australians into good careers and backing small businesses that train them and building the skilled workforce that Australia needs. This is something every member of the House should be able to support. When Labor came into government, Australia was facing skills shortages at a 50-year high. We've been working to turn that around, and the Jobs and Skills Australia data shows the proportion of occupations in shortage fell from 36% in 2023 to 29% in 2025. There is more work to do, and we are heading in the right direction. Free TAFE is part of that work too. There have been now more than 814,000 free TAFE enrolments in courses supporting the skills Australia needs, from tradies to nurses and early childhood educators. And the key apprenticeship program makes sure that we're targeting support where Australia needs workers most. In the 2026 budget has locked the program in until 2029, including the $10,000 incentive for apprentices and target incentives for small and medium-sized employers and group training organisations. Because apprentices do not train themselves, behind so many apprentices is a small business owner giving someone their first opportunity, teaching them the trade and investing their own time in the next generation of skilled workers. That is why I was so disappointed to see the Shadow Minister for Skills and Training describe the program as wrong and accuse the government of throwing good money and I quote, throwing good money after bad money. Backing an apprentice is not throwing money away. Helping a young electrician afford their tools is not throwing money away. Supporting a small plumbing business to take on an apprentice is not throwing money away.
The member for Petrie will resume their seat. The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business, order of the day number 1, resumption of the debate on the motion related to energy costs, moved by the member for Warren.
And I give the call to the member for McPherson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, Australians need to look no further than their power bills to determine the effects of bad government policy on the ordinary lives of Australians. And Deputy Speaker, we are quite frustrated on this side, but we're not frustrated just because we're the opposition. We're frustrated because we're channeling the frustrations of those that we represent around the country. And Deputy Speaker, what does that look like? It looks like families who are struggling to afford their own energy costs. It looks like older Australians who, I represent parts of Queensland, but people are not prepared to turn on their air conditioning in summer, and I don't want to have to go through that again for people in my electorate. It looks like small businesses who are having to decide where they're going to cut in their day or in their staff because of the increased costs. And it looks like goods and services across this country getting more and more expensive due to the rising costs of energy. Deputy Speaker, Australians were promised a $275 cut to their power bills prior to this government becoming elected. And that promise extended to a $378 cut by 2030. But where have we got to? We've got to a situation where Australians are paying up to $1,300 more. We're seeing electricity costs having risen by 21.5% in the 12 months to December 2025. So instead of those promises coming to fruition, we're seeing Australians having to deal with the opposite. There are 230,000 households in Australia at the moment in energy distress, up nearly 70% in just 3.5 years. That's the highest level of hardship on record. And it's disheartening, Deputy Speaker, when I speak to those opposite, when we hear the contributions that they make, and they're saying that these are all the things that we're doing as a government in this space. And they're failing to recognise that it's not actually trickling down to Australians, to individuals, to businesses and to families. Deputy Speaker, I say to Australians though, there is an alternative. And the Coalition has recently come out with our plan. Australia should be an energy superpower. There is no reason why we as a country should have our citizens dealing with the high cost of energy that they're dealing with today. And Australians deserve and need a government that's prepared to harness everything, every opportunity that we have as a country, and we're blessed with so much of that. Which is why, in contrast to what we're seeing under Labor, a Taylor Coalition government will deliver cheaper power and an abundance of energy. And we do that through backing any technology that can deliver that affordable and reliable energy for Australian households and businesses. We do that through working with coal-fired power plant operators to make sure that that generation is running as long and as hard as it can to get electricity prices down. We do that through lifting the ban on nuclear power, through scrapping Labor's carbon taxes, including the safeguard mechanism, which in essence has turned into a carbon tax on business that's driving industry offshore. And Labor's other taxes on cars and utes, for example. And we do that, Deputy Speaker, with an ultimate aim of lowering emissions as quickly and responsibly as technology allows, without imposing those additional costs on families or industry, especially at a time when we know that they just cannot absorb those costs. Deputy Speaker, that is the alternative. This government came to power promising cheaper energy, and it was a defining election promise for them, a $275 reduction that Australians never saw, and a $378 reduction by 2030 that they still will not see. But instead, Australians have received the opposite. Higher bills, greater uncertainty, and a fragile grid that's underpinned by ideology, not economics. Deputy Speaker, I speak on behalf of thousands and millions of Australians who say to this government that it is time for the government to come clean, to stop the spin, and to deliver real, affordable and reliable energy, not just more of the broken promises that we've seen.
And I thank the member for McPherson. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I'm really pleased to speak to this motion because energy policy does matter, and it's a big difference on this side of the House compared to the others. It matters because ultimately it comes down to something very simple. Australians pay every time they turn on the light, boil the kettle or charge their car. For families, they're already dealing with cost of living, groceries, housing and other everyday expenses, so energy bills matter. We get it. Our government's approach has been to tackle this challenge on two fronts: to provide immediate cost of living relief while investing in cheaper, safer and more reliable energy system for the future. And that distinction is important. If we want lasting reductions in energy costs, Australians need to increase the supply of affordable electricity, and that means reducing our exposure to expensive fossil fuel generation. So what's Labor doing? Well, under the Energy Bill Relief Fund, Australian households and eligible small businesses received up to $150 in electricity rebates delivered through those 275 credits on electricity bills. And that followed earlier rounds of energy bill relief. And these rebates matter because they provide immediate assistance while longer-term investments in Australia's electricity system are being built. But Labor's energy policy isn't just about rebates. Deputy Speaker, one of the biggest opportunities we have in Australia is in renewable energy. Australia has extraordinary solar and wind resources, and once renewable projects are constructed, coal and gas become far less relevant. Labor's objective is to increase renewable energy while ensuring we have the storage and infrastructure necessary to keep electricity reliable. Now, through the Capacity Investment Scheme, we are supporting investment in renewable generation and dispatchable storage. And why does that matter to consumers? Because increasing supply of low-cost electricity backed by batteries and other storage puts downward pressure on wholesale electricity prices and reduces reliance on expensive fossil fuel generation, especially during times of high demand. And that's why Labor is helping households produce and store more of their own renewable energy. Our Cheaper Home Batteries program began last year, providing around a 30% discount on the upfront costs of eligible batteries connected to rooftop solar. And we know that there are millions of solar rooftops in Australia. The challenge is, though, that the solar produces enormous amounts of energy during the day, while households often consume large amounts of electricity in the evening, and batteries change that equation. With batteries, instead of exporting solar electricity during the middle of the day, then buying it back from the grid at night, households with a battery can now store more of their own electricity and use it later. And it's estimated that eligible households could save around $4,000 on the upfront costs of an 11.5 kilowatt hour battery. And Australians have responded, Deputy Speaker. I'm sure we've heard the Minister. Within the first 6 months of the program, more than 160,000 batteries were installed. Now we see an uptake of approximately 500,000. And the current program could help more than 2 million Australians install batteries by 2030. Labor is also helping people make their homes more energy efficient. The $1 billion Household Energy Upgrades Fund supports discounted finance for improvements, including solar batteries, insulation, double glazing and efficient electric appliances. By April 2026, the program had helped finance more than 10,000 energy upgrades across 4,100 Australian homes. Deputy Speaker, the energy transition is not just about emissions targets, it is about household economics. It is about helping families use the electricity generated on their own roofs. It is about building enough renewable energy generation and storage so Australia has a reliable electricity system as ageing coal-fired power stations retire. Deputy Speaker, retail electricity prices are affected by a lot of issues, but what governments can influence are the fundamentals. We can increase supply of renewable energy, we can encourage competition and investment, we can build storage, we can help households improve efficiency, and we can make technologies like batteries more affordable. We heard from the member for McPherson about their new plan allowing for nuclear energy, which we don't need when we have renewables, and running coal as hard as they can. That's in stark contrast to us. Deputy Speaker, some of the best renewable energy resources in the world are here in Australia. Labor's goal is to make sure Australians don't just help produce that energy, but they share in the economic benefits of it.
I thank the member for Brisbane. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Durack.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise in support of the motion moved by the member for Wannon. I support this motion because energy affordability affects every Australian. Whether they are a small business owner, a parent or a pensioner, they are feeling the pinch of rising energy costs every day. At the 2022 election, Labor promised lower power bills. Now, he may not have said it 50 times, but the Prime Minister sure did say it a lot through that campaign that power bills would go down by $275. There has not been a reduction in power bills. Another broken promise by the Labor government. The reality is electricity costs continue to rise and households across regional Western Australia continue to pay higher prices. This motion notes that a record number of Australians are carrying energy debts, with many facing further increases in their power bills. The motion also notes that Australians were promised lower power prices and instead are paying more. Now, despite the lecturing we get from those opposite, Deputy Speaker, regarding the cost of living support that the Labor government is providing, regional West Australians are still dealing with the rising cost of groceries, insurance and fuel. Sadly, higher energy prices are adding another layer of financial stress to everyday Australians. In regional Western Australia, higher energy costs don't just affect the household budgets, they affect industry. From agriculture and mining to manufacturing and transport, affordable energy underpins our economic activity. When energy prices increase, those costs flow through to our families. It is this government's failed energy policy that has caused electricity costs to rise by some 21.5% in the 12 months to December 2025. Deputy Speaker, who doesn't love a rebate in their electricity bill? Well, I do. I'm sure everyone in this House appreciates that. But temporary relief does not reduce the underlying costs of electricity. Good energy policy should deliver three things: affordability, reliability and sustainability. And these three things are the basis of the Coalition's energy policy. We believe that Australia should pursue a balanced energy mix that makes use of all available resources and technologies rather than placing all our energy security in the hands of one resource. By scrapping net zero, this can be achieved. A policy of net zero, we all know, costs everyday Australian, everyday taxpayer billions of dollars as the Labor Party continues to subsidise renewable energy. And despite all of this investment by the Albanese Labor government, energy prices continue to rise and Australians pay the price. We, of course, support investment in renewable energy. Well, of course we do. But we must also recognise the importance of gas, coal and nuclear in providing reliable and affordable energy. The Coalition will lift the ban on nuclear and supports it as part of Australia's long-term future. Nuclear energy provides reliable, 24-hour, zero-emissions power and is already used successfully in many of the world's most advanced economies. We will end Labor's carbon taxes, including the safeguard mechanisms, Labor's car and ute tax as well. And while Labor are focused with their net zero obsession, we will not be focused on that. The Coalition is committed to making Australia the energy superpower it once was, using our natural resources, investing in technology and scrapping net zero. Now, West Australians, they understand the value of practical energy policy. They're a practical mob, especially in regional Western Australia. For decades, our domestic gas reservation policy has helped support energy security, local industry and affordable power. It shows how valuable our natural resources are to our energy systems. Now, Deputy Speaker, we are one of the most energy-rich nations in the world. You have to ask yourself, why then do Australian families feel poorer under the Albanese government? Under Labor, energy prices have skyrocketed while emissions have gone up. This is a failure of government. A Coalition government will deliver lower energy prices, support industry, strengthen regional communities and ensure our energy system remains reliable for future generations to come.
I thank the member for Durack. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Sturt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Energy security is a critical part of every economy. It's an issue of national security, of food security. Without energy security, health services are compromised. Our defence forces cannot perform optimally, putting the safety of personnel at risk, and everyday Australians cannot do the work and leisure activities they take for granted. Energy security is about availability. So having enough energy sources like solar, wind, gas, hydro to meet everyday demand and peak demand. Energy security is about reliability, or the grid's capability to recover quickly from unexpected faults, extreme weather or equipment failure. And balanced with reliability and availability, energy security is about affordability, about keeping prices fair, keeping them as stable as possible so that households and businesses can access reliable energy at a price that does not cause hardship. The Albanese Labor government understands this, and although it has acted to address energy costs, we know there is more to do. Power bill relief and gas price caps have played a role in this, as has the Solar Sharer Scheme and the Cheaper Home Batteries program, with over 500,000 Australians having taken advantage of this in the past 12 months. And in my electorate of Sturt, people write to me telling me that thanks to this program, they no longer receive a bill. This is a good thing and we need more of it. The Cheaper Home Batteries scheme is part of the industrial scale transition from ageing coal-fired powered plants to clean, renewable energy, firmed up, for now, by gas. We know that substantial investment is needed, and we know that this investment will create new social and economic opportunities in all sectors and regions, but will need to be sustained over the long term, because the transition to renewable energy will not happen overnight. We need to be patient. We can't just say prices are too high, so the transition has failed. We need to take risks, and we need to recognise that these risks are not only about what could go wrong, but what could go right. We need to continue investing, researching, exploring and walking together when risks don't always crystallise immediately. And this is especially when Treasury modelling shows that wholesale electricity costs will be lower than the long-term average under the transition to renewable energy. Now, although patience is required, that doesn't necessarily help households seeking to meet cost of living challenges now, including energy costs. So as well as energy bill relief and providing opportunities like community and home batteries, there are structural changes to the energy market that this government has implemented to make the market fairer for consumers. The Australian Energy Market Commission has implemented new rules that will prohibit energy retailers from increasing prices more than once a year. The rules will also prevent customers from being charged more than the standing offer price if their initial low-cost entry offer changes or expires. In addition, excessive retailer charges like late payment fees for retail contracts will be banned, and more opportunities will be provided to help people shop around so that low-income families and other vulnerable Australians are receiving the best possible deal together with proper, meaningful assistance in times of hardship. This government also commissioned the Nelson Review, which reported in December 2025, to examine a number of matters relevant to the national electricity market, including what the best future market settings are to promote investment in firmed renewable generation and storage capacity within the national electricity market, and how best to support the development and staged implementation of reforms to the national electricity market wholesale market that support the achievement of the national electricity objectives. And these are to promote efficient investment and the efficient operation and use of electricity services for the long-term interests of consumers of electricity with respect to many issues, including price, quality, safety, reliability and security of supply. So we are acting. Short-term relief for Australians and Australian businesses when it is needed, medium-term structural change with respect to the wholesale markets, retail markets and the national electricity market, and a long-term achievable transition to clean, renewable energy, which in my electorate of Sturt is what many people in the community are asking for.
The member's time has expired. I give the call to the member for Barker.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Albanese Labor government came to power promising cheaper power. I'd argue it was an election-defining promise. The Prime Minister uttered it no less than 96 times. You'll recall a $275 reduction that Australians ended up never seeing, and a $378 reduction that by 2030 they will absolutely never see. Now, the Prime Minister saying one thing before an election and doing another thing after an election is a practice he's obviously maintained in the subsequent election, having told Australians he wouldn't seek to change property taxes, on this occasion 50 times, but he did the same. Instead, Australians, in terms of power prices, didn't get cheaper electricities, they got higher bills, they got greater uncertainty, they got a fragile grid underpinned by ideology and not economics. Mr Deputy Speaker, it's time for those opposite to come clean, to stop the spin and deliver real and affordable, reliable energy, not more broken promises. That's what our plan does by backing in abundant, affordable, sustainable energy generation that spans the gamut from nuclear power, coal, gas, renewables, rather than this renewables-only madness that will create an experiment that's failing in South Australia, my home state.
And I thank the member for Barker. The time allotted for this debate has expired. In accordance with the resolution of 12th of August, it being 1:30 p.m, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 12:30 p.m. tomorrow in accordance with the resolution agreed to on the 12th of August 2026.